I woke up on a hard bed that smelled like old, unwashed socks. My head was spinning. This wasn't my room. Walls of mud, a roof of straw, spiderwebs everywhere. Then it hit me. I died playing video games too late at night, and now I was in another world. My name here was Leo. My foster father found me as a baby near a misty forest and raised me like his own son. He used to be an adventurer. Half a year ago, goblins attacked our village, and he died fighting them off, poisoned by their blade. After that, people stopped helping me. Life got hard fast. I even got sick from swimming in the river the other day, trying to catch fish for food. Great, I thought. Other people who get sent to new worlds become kings or nobles. I get to be a broke orphan with nothing to eat. Then I heard a scream outside. I jumped up, grabbed my straw sandals, and crept to the door. I peeked through the crack, and my blood went cold. Goblins. Green, ugly, 2 meters tall, smashing someone's head open with a club right outside. A few smaller ones were beating a girl, dragging her by the hair and tearing her clothes. I clamped a hand over my own mouth so I wouldn't make a sound. I grabbed a plank of wood and jammed it against the door, then backed away and pulled my sword off the wall. It was the last gift my foster father gave me. I never sold it, no matter how poor I got. The moment I touched the sword, a strange glowing panel popped up in front of me, like a game screen. It showed my stats: strength, agility, endurance, spirit, all pretty average, level 1. I had a mana pool, a weapon skill, an empty job slot, a backpack system, a map feature, and even a lottery for magic skills. Then I noticed the catch. Almost everything cost money to use. Coins, gold, all of it. Are you kidding me? I groaned. Of all the things I needed, money was exactly what I didn't have. Before I could feel sorry for myself, something rammed into my door. Dust fell from the ceiling. I gripped my sword tighter. If that door broke, I'd have to fight for my life. The door cracked again. Voices chattered outside, goblins, agitated now. I told them, out loud, that I'd take as many of them down with me as I could. Then a goblin's head shoved through the gap in the broken door. I didn't hesitate. I drove my sword straight into its eye. It gurgled, twitched, and went still. Pulling my blade free, I felt like I understood the sword a little better now, like something had clicked in my hands. The other goblins outside got angrier hearing their friend die. Another blow slammed into the door. This time it broke completely, along with the plank I'd used to block it. I didn't care anymore. I was ready to die fighting. Then something got thrown into the room, a body. My stomach turned. It was the headless corpse of the villager they'd just killed, tossed in to scare me. The goblins laughed outside, thinking I'd panic. Instead, I dropped down and started searching the body for anything useful. The goblins outside went quiet, confused. Then the doorway darkened. A huge goblin ducked its way in, blood and brains still dripping off its club, grinning at me like it already knew how this would end. I looked at the headless body and thought fast. Most farmers in the village didn't carry money, but this guy was different. He was the village baker, and he always kept a coin pouch on his belt. I didn't care how gross it was anymore. I dug through the body and found the pouch. It wasn't heavy, but it had coins in it, and that's all that mattered. I spent every coin I had right there. A new magic skill unlocked in my head, a freezing ray. I understood how to use it instantly, like it was just downloaded into my brain. The doorway went dark again. The big goblin ducked in, club raised, ready to strike. I raised my left hand and blasted it with a beam of blue-white light. Goblins don't have thick fur, so the cold hit it hard. In seconds, its skin turned blue and a thin layer of frost formed on it. It slowed down right in front of me. I dropped the freezing spell and lunged with my sword in both hands. One clean strike through its throat. It didn't even finish screaming before it dropped. Outside, the other goblins hadn't caught up yet. I paid a few coins to scan the area, and a little map appeared in my head, showing dots for every goblin nearby. One was right at my door, 4 more were spread out just outside. The goblin at the door tried to taunt me. I ignored it completely and just wiped my sword clean on the dead goblin's body like it wasn't even there. That made it angry enough to charge in swinging its club. My sword was faster and longer. I ran it straight through its neck before it got close. I finished it off with a kick for good measure. I scanned again. The goblins outside were pulling back, retreating toward the village entrance. I didn't think twice. I ran outside and caught sight of a small goblin fleeing. I hit it with the freezing ray, slowed it down, closed the distance, and finished it the same way. The rest had already vanished past the village gate. Once it was over, I looked down at my dripping sword, then up at the rising sun. It should have been a peaceful morning in the countryside. Instead, the dirt road was covered in blood and bodies. Chickens, dogs, and people too. The air smelled like blood and animal waste. People were screaming for help all over the village. A group of villagers ran up with makeshift weapons, led by the village chief, asking where the goblins went. I told him bluntly that if he'd hurried, he could have watched Peter the baker get his head smashed in. The chief was furious to hear the baker was dead, but he didn't seem in any hurry to actually chase the goblins down. I remembered what my foster father once told me, how the empire had collapsed generations ago, leaving small villages like ours to fend for themselves with barely any real protection. The chief was just the head of whichever family had the most muscle, and that muscle was maybe a dozen able-bodied men. When real trouble came, he was better at hiding than fighting. The chief noticed my door was smashed in and spotted the big goblin's body, stunned that I'd killed it myself. I told him it was mostly luck. The goblin couldn't move well in such a cramped space. Before he could say more, a villager ran up with worse news. Several girls had been taken during the attack. The chief told everyone to tally the losses and meet at the longhouse to talk it over, and told me to come too. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten in a long time. Back in my hut, surrounded by the smell of death, I found the only food I had, a rock-hard piece of dark rye bread on the shelf, made stiffer by cheap filler grains. I soaked it in water from the well before I could even chew it. It was sour and awful, but it was food, and I felt steadier after eating it. A freckle-faced girl came by to tell me the chief wanted me at the longhouse. I told her I'd be right there, and she took off holding her nose, unable to stand the smell of blood coming from my house. With some strength back in me, I dragged the big goblin's body outside, then the other three. Once that was done, I headed for the longhouse. At the longhouse, the herbalist Gavin told the chief he'd treated the minor injuries, but some people were hurt too badly and needed real healing from a temple. Gavin had shown up in the village half a year ago, and with his good looks and healer skills, people liked him a lot more than they liked me, especially the girls. He asked if I was feeling better, and I thanked him for the medicine he'd given me the day before. The chief slammed his hand on the table, furious that goblins kept coming back no matter how many times we killed them, and angry they dared to raid the village this time. The old hunter, a man everyone respected even though he had no family of his own, said these were probably the same goblins we'd driven off half a year ago. That's the only way they'd know the village layout so well. He was the kind of man who shared his extra game with poor families in the village, mine included. Someone brought up that 3 girls had been taken and over a dozen people were dead. The chief said to gather the bodies and burn them so they wouldn't rise as undead. Someone asked about hiring real adventurers, but another villager pointed out the girls might already be dead by the time help arrived. A young man asked the old hunter if goblins ate the people they captured. The hunter said it might be worse than that. They might be used for breeding, which was more horrifying than death. The young man wanted to rush out and save the girls immediately, but the hunter shook his head. Goblins never send their whole group out raiding. There had to be more back at their nest, way more than we could handle alone, especially with a big goblin involved. The chief decided to send the badly wounded to Hill Town by cart and hire real adventurers to wipe the goblins out. He told me to come with him to town, and told the old hunter to try tracking down the goblin nest while everyone else stayed alert for another attack. We loaded up the wounded and set off. It took most of the day to reach Hill Town. At the temple of the Earth Goddess, a priestess in white robes looked over the wounded and promised they'd be healed. The chief handed over a heavy bag of coins as a donation. I could tell it hurt him to give that much away, though I figured he'd just make the whole village pay him back later somehow. Next we went to the Adventurers Guild. It was smaller than I expected, just a 2-story building, and not many adventurers were around since most were already out on jobs. The chief posted a quest to wipe out the goblins and rescue the girls, offering 100 silver coins as the reward. I about choked hearing that number. That was a fortune for killing some goblins. A 4-person team calling themselves Alpine took the job almost immediately. Their leader was a bald, tough-looking guy carrying a hand-and-a-half sword. The rest of the group was a shield user in rusty chainmail, an archer in leather gear, and a priestess with a mace at her hip. The chief stayed behind to wait on the wounded, So I rode back to the village with the adventurers. On the way, the bald leader asked if I could fight. I told him I'd learned a little from my foster father. The archer teased that fighting wasn't a kid's game. People die out here. I told him that's exactly why they'd hired professionals. The archer told me a story about another village that tried to save money by fighting monsters on their own instead of hiring help. The whole village got wiped out, eaten alive, not a single survivor. The priestess quietly prayed for their souls. I said that was on them for being cheap, and the archer seemed surprised I agreed instead of arguing like most people did. The leader asked if I'd fought goblins before. I told him I'd killed a few, leaving out the part about my freezing spell, and just described the raid and retreat. He guessed the attack was too well-timed to be random, hitting right when villagers were heading out for morning farm work, then pulling back fast. He suspected there might be a smart goblin, maybe even a spellcaster, leading them. That worried him, since it meant more danger for less pay relative to the risk. I just smiled to myself. I'd seen this same bald guy shove aside other adventurers to grab this job for himself back at the guild, and now here he was, acting like it was some huge sacrifice. Worse actor than anyone I'd ever seen. It was deep night by the time we made it back to the village, but somehow no wild beasts had attacked us on the way. A villager on watch asked who I'd brought back, and I told him these were the adventurers the chief hired, then asked if old Tom had returned yet. He had. He was resting at the chief's longhouse. I led the adventurers there, telling them the old hunter had spent the whole day tracking the goblins and would have solid information for them. At the longhouse, Tom reported that the goblins had built their nest in the ruins of an old village to the southwest, maybe 50 to 70 of them, plus 2 big ones. The bald leader immediately guessed there had to be a smart goblin controlling things, since regular goblins couldn't manage 2 big brutes on their own. Tom said he hadn't spotted anything like that directly, but the 2 big goblins kept guarding one particular building, so whatever was special was probably hiding inside. The chief's wife and daughter Asha brought out food, stewed meat, and dark bread. The adventurers dug in without any manners. Asha put a big bowl in front of me too, winking at me while she did it. I tore my bread into the meat and ate like I hadn't eaten in days. The chief's wife acted warm and generous, telling me to eat more if I wanted. Anyone who didn't know better would think she'd always been kind to me. Truth was, ever since my foster father died, she'd been one of the coldest people toward me, even keeping Asha away from me before. I figured the chief must have told her to change her tune now, probably because if I really had my foster father's strength, that meant one more fighter for the village. Once I was full, I left Tom and the adventurers talking strategy and went back to my broken-down hut. I didn't even care about the smell anymore. I just dropped onto my hard bed and passed out. The next morning, barely light out, someone pounded on my door, and my patched-together door fell apart again. It was Tom, telling me he was heading out with the adventurers to the goblin nest, and I could come along to watch how real fighters worked. I figured why not? Maybe I'd pick up some experience of my own. I grabbed my sword and followed him out, ignoring the mixed comments from villagers watching us leave, some encouraging, some muttering that I was just walking into the same fate that killed my foster father. The bald leader hurried us along, annoyed at the noise from the crowd. At the goblin nest, the leader studied the terrain from a hillside. He pointed out that goblins couldn't set real traps on this kind of ground, but their numbers would still be a problem. He noted the villagers hiding as lookouts everywhere, and said only a few goblins were visible now. The rest were probably sleeping, but disturbing, even one could bring the whole group swarming. He pointed to a roofless stone building on the west side of the ruins and laid out a plan. Use that building to lure the goblins in and let the stone walls block their numbers advantage. He gave 2 options. Either the whole group holds that position and grinds the goblins down slowly, risking them turning violent and killing the hostages, or 3 of them go in to draw attention while he sneaks in through the back to rescue the girls himself. The shield user raised a concern. If the big goblins joined the fight at the ruined house, they might not be able to hold the line. But if the big goblins didn't move, the leader alone might not be able to take both of them down. Tom offered to help by shooting arrows, but the leader said normal arrows wouldn't do enough damage to something that size. Tom said he could at least lure them away instead, and the shield user agreed that would work. The leader told Tom to stick close and lure the big goblins away no matter what, and turned to me since I'd spoken up about knowing some combat. He didn't look convinced, but told me to just go help Tom. The 3 other adventurers crept off toward the west side. The leader waved for us to follow him east. Tom quietly told me I should probably just stay back, but I told him I could handle myself, and he let it go. A while later, we reached the eastern edge of the ruined village. The leader told Tom to wait for the signal from the west, then draw out just one of the big goblins when the moment came. Tom nodded. Soon, chaos broke out on the west side. The goblin lookout screamed the alarm, and a swarm of goblins came pouring out toward the ruined house. But the 2 big goblins guarding the door stayed put, unmoving. The leader signaled it was Tom's turn. Tom told me to wait up ahead, knocked an arrow, and crept toward the distant building. Moments later, one of the big goblins let out a furious roar and charged straight at him after the arrow struck it. Tom took off running. I stayed put, watching the other big goblin closing in on Tom from behind. Huge, swinging its club like a tank. Tom yelled at me to run too, but I just raised my left hand, cold mist already curling off my fingers. Tom saw the shock on his own face reflected in what happened next. He knew I'd killed a big goblin alone before, but everyone figured it was just luck, a tight space, a lucky angle. This was different. My freezing beam shot past him and hit the big goblin chasing him dead on. It was early autumn, still warm, and the goblin had been running hard, sweating, pores wide open. The cold hit it at the worst possible moment. Its body seized up, its movements turned stiff and slow. I didn't waste the opening. Beam in one hand, sword in the other, I charged and drove my blade straight through its throat, then dropped the spell, gripped the sword with both hands, and tore it sideways. Blood sprayed like a fountain. The goblin dropped. Tom just stood there with his mouth open. It had taken seconds, start to finish. I felt something shift inside me, strength flooding through my whole body. My sword skill leveled up, and I learned a new move, a sweeping crescent slash. My level went up too, making me stronger and tougher. Killing things, it turned out, was the only way to actually grow. I spent my last bit of money on another skill roll and got something called Force Grip, magic threads that could yank a target toward me from a distance. Not exactly a fireball, but I'd take what I could get since I had no money left to reroll. I flicked the blood off my sword and looked over at the bald leader, who was still locked in a tough fight with the last big goblin. I told Tom he probably needed backup. Tom looked between me and the goblin corpse at my feet, remembering what my foster father used to say, that he found me wandering the misty forest alone as a kid, and that alone told him I wasn't ordinary. Tom told me to go, promising to cover me. I ran in with my sword raised, slashing the big goblin's leg tendon from behind while it was distracted. Tom fired an arrow at its face at the same moment, forcing it to block with its arm and cry out in pain. The bald leader used the opening to swing with both hands, tearing a massive gash across its exposed belly. Guts spilled out. The goblin dropped to its knees, wailing. More regular goblins poured out of the building right then. I told the leader I'd handle it, and cut one down before he could even react. He didn't complain about me stealing the kill, just turned and cut down another goblin himself. Within seconds we'd cleared the rest together. The leader told us to hold the perimeter while he went inside alone. I agreed, and he charged in. Tom turned to ask me when I'd gotten so strong. Then a pained shout cut him off from inside. It was the leader's voice. I bolted through the door without thinking. What I saw stopped me cold. The leader who'd been fighting so fiercely moments ago was now sprawled on the floor, burned black all over, shaking. Behind a bound girl, a hooded goblin in robes crouched low, hands weaving through the air, sparks of electricity crackling between its fingers. Without thinking, I threw my left hand out. Invisible threads wrapped around the hooded goblin and yanked it straight off its feet before it could react, dragging it through the air toward me. It flailed helplessly, its cruel eyes flashing with panic under the hood. Power surged up from my feet, through my hips, into my sword arm. One clean crescent slash cut clean through it in midair. The two halves hit the floor in a mess of blood and guts. Tom, catching up behind me, gasped. A goblin spellcaster, cut down in a single stroke. Then another goblin screeched. Tom shouted for it to let the girl go. There was a second goblin in the room, trembling, holding a knife to another captive girl's throat. I understood instantly what had happened to the leader. He must have been drawn toward this goblin and the hostage first, giving the spellcaster hiding behind the other girl a clean shot at him from behind. Tom raised his bow, but didn't dare fire, afraid of hitting the hostage. I just scoffed, raised my left hand again and pulled. My blade flashed and cut the goblin's throat clean open. I stepped aside as it dropped. The girls saw it happen and burst into tears of relief. Their rescue had finally arrived. I walked over and cut their ropes. Are you okay? We're fine. Leo, Tom, thank you for coming. Save the thanks for when we're back in the village, I told them. I checked on the bald leader, still burned black, but somehow alive. He asked for healing. I told him the priestess couldn't get to us right now, so I'd help him move instead. Then Tom called from the doorway. The goblins had spotted us. About 10 were running our way. I pointed the girls toward the hillside where we'd hidden earlier and told them to get the leader up there and out of sight. One of them asked if I was coming too. I told her someone had to hold the goblins off. Tom backed me up, telling them to just listen and go. They lifted the leader between them and hurried off. Tom offered to cover me. I thanked him, sheathed my sword, and picked up the leader's longsword instead, giving it a quick spin. My sword skill carried over easily to the new blade. I raised my left hand and blasted the charging goblins with cold. Even the tough ones couldn't handle that kind of chill, let alone the regular ones. A thin layer of frost coated them instantly and slowed them down. Tom fired first, dropping one with an arrow through the skull. I swung the long sword in a sweeping arc and took 2 heads off in one motion. Stab, sweep, chop, slash. Every strike found something vital. In under a minute the ground was littered with dead goblins, though I was running low on mana. Tom shouted at me to pull back before the rest of them swarmed us. Instead, I grabbed a couple of crude goblin spears off the ground. A new option unlocked in my head, a second weapon skill. I activated it for the spear. I tossed the longsword back to Tom. He asked what I was planning. Killing the rest of them, obviously, I said, and charged west with the spear raised. Tom cursed at me for being reckless, but slung the sword on his back and grabbed his bow, chasing after me anyway. The goblins spotted me coming, and actual panic rippled through their group. I could see the other adventurers holding the ruined building's entrance, the shield user blocking the doorway, bodies piled up in front of him, several with arrows through their skulls from the archer. A few goblins broke off to intercept me. I threw my spear underhand mid-sprint and skewered one clean through. I grinned and kept running, Tom right behind me. The goblins chasing us screeched and gave chase. Halfway across the field, I spun around, blasted them with the freezing beam, then drove forward with the spear, stab, pull out, stab again. The spear tore through their thin bodies even faster than my sword had. By the time Tom caught up, the goblins chasing us were already dead on the ground, and I was finishing off the ones still twitching, driving the spear tip into their eyes and twisting before pulling it free. I felt my strength growing with every kill. Grinning, I grabbed the spear and charged forward again, shouting for the others to push out. The goblins were thinning out fast. Inside, the pressure lifting gave the 3 adventurers their opening. The shield user smashed a goblin aside with his shield and charged out. The archer swapped to his sidearm and followed. Even the priestess ran out swinging her mace, cracking a goblin's skull with one hit. I drove my spear through another goblin's throat and yanked it sideways, sending the body crashing into 2 more. Tom's arrow dropped another one mid-shriek, and I finished it off with a thrust. With their leaders dead, the remaining goblins started losing their nerve. Then the adventurers hit them from the other side, catching them in a pincer. Goblins started dying fast, and true to form, they broke and ran, abandoning their own wounded. I threw my spear and pinned one more to the ground. Tom kept firing, but plenty still escaped into the open field where nobody could catch them. Tom cursed under his breath about the ones that got away. In a year or 2, they'd probably regroup and the village would be paying for another rescue mission. None of the adventurers bothered chasing either. Goblins held grudges, and running them down in open terrain wasn't worth it. I couldn't have chased them anyway. My mana was gone, and my body was running on fumes. But unlike Tom, who looked annoyed at the ones that got away, I couldn't stop grinning. I'd leveled up again. I felt strength rush through me again. My spear thrust came out faster and harder now. The shield user came jogging back, out of breath, saying they'd finally cleared everything out. The archer noticed someone was missing, their leader. I told him with a straight face that their leader had sacrificed his life so I could kill the goblin boss, and that he should be proud of such a heroic death. The archer's face went blank with shock. Then I told him I was joking. The leader wasn't dead yet, though he might be if we didn't hurry. I walked over to the priestess, whose white robes were soaked in blood, her mace still dripping. I told her their leader was hurt and waiting up on the hillside, and asked her to go heal him right away. She thanked me and rushed off. The archer grumbled that he'd almost gotten excited thinking they'd split the pay one less way, then accused me of being cruel for the joke. I pointed out his voice had cracked like he was about to cry. He claimed it was normal to get emotional over his loyal leader. The shield user picked up his shield and headed into the building to search for stragglers. The archer went off grumbling to search elsewhere. I told Tom to check on the girls while I searched too, and he went off toward the hillside, telling me to be careful. I picked through the scattered weapons on the ground, grabbing a few decent spears and storing them away. Once my storage was full, I joined the search. I checked the map again. No more red dots anywhere. No goblin pups. No food stores either, which struck me as odd. The shield user came out looking just as puzzled, having found nothing either. The archer jogged over and declared the job done. Goblins cleared. Hostages saved. Time to head home. Up on the hillside, the bald leader could talk again, though he still looked wrecked. He told me the priestess's healing wasn't like something out of a game. It just sped up his body's own recovery, and it cost him plenty of stamina in return. He admitted it had been close, and that he owed me for it. Shaking, he pulled out his coin pouch and handed me 15 silver as a thank you. I said it was nothing, but I took every coin without hesitation. I needed the money badly enough that I'd been scavenging broken weapons off the battlefield. As the group started back toward the village, I hung back and quietly spent everything I had left except 5 coins on another skill roll. I got a light spell, grumbled about how useless it was, spent more to re-roll, got a water creation spell, grumbled about that too, and re-rolled one more time. This one gave me a healing stone, a spell that could drain the remaining life out of a dying target to create a stone that instantly healed whoever ate it later. Grim, but useful. I decided to stop there and keep it. The walk back took a while since we had a wounded man and 3 rescued girls slowing us down. By the time we reached Kasong village, the moon was already high. Something was wrong the moment we got close. The gate was wide open, and the militia who should have been guarding it were nowhere in sight. The whole village was silent, too silent, not even insects. The leader, with some strength back, ordered everyone to stay alert. The adventurers spread out around the 3 girls. Tom went ahead to check things out. I stayed near the entrance instead and noticed something dark pooled in the shadows. I crouched down and touched it. The smell hit me immediately. Blood. Fresh, not even dried yet. A faint sound reached my ears. I triggered my scan instinctively, and the map lit up in front of me, packed with red dots, filling every house and dark corner of the village. "It's an ambush," I shouted. Tom spun around, but it was already too late. A spear flew out of the shadows and struck him in the chest. He staggered, staring at the figures emerging from the dark. Goblins, but bigger, armored, weapons gleaming under the moonlight. "Run! It's a goblin army." His voice cut off as a blade flashed through the dark. More armored goblins poured out from every corner of the village. Then a massive shadow rose up from somewhere deep inside. I didn't hesitate. I turned and ran, shouting for everyone to move. The adventurers were already falling back at my first warning. The 3 girls clung close to the priestess, terrified. Out in the dark fields beyond the village, dozens of wolves emerged from the shadows, and riding them, goblin cavalry with spears, baring their teeth, ready to charge. The wolves charged under the moonlight, their eyes glowing green. The goblin riders raised their spears. The priestess called out to her goddess and threw up a shield of light. Spears hit it and bounced off harmlessly. The archer ran up close and fired an arrow that punched straight through the shield, knocking a wolf rider off its mount. The riders spread out, hunting for a gap in our defense. 3 wolves spotted me falling behind and turned my way, riders leveling their spears, wolves baring their teeth. A spear appeared in my hand as I ran. Before the lead rider could react, I threw it. The spear punched straight through the charging wolf. It screamed and tumbled, throwing its rider, who landed wrong and snapped his neck. I blasted the next 2 with my freezing beam, slowing them down. A new spear appeared in my hand. My body surged forward in a burst of speed, and I drove the spear straight through a wolf's open mouth with my piercing thrust skill. Letting go, another spear appeared, and I stabbed the slowed rider on the next wolf's back before throwing the spear to finish off the last wolf, sending its rider crashing to the ground. Before the goblin could even get up, I was on him. My blade flashed red across his throat. I grabbed him by the neck as he bled out, and mana surged through my hand. His body shriveled up in an instant, drained dry, leaving behind a small green crystal in my palm. I tossed the husk aside, stored the spears and crystal away, and caught up with the group. I told them the village was crawling with more goblins, and we had to push through before we got surrounded. I didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone could already see it. Goblins were pouring out of the village, armored and armed, and among them was something the size of an ogre. The bald leader cursed, calling it a goblin hero, stunned something like that existed out here. The shield user said flatly he'd hold them off. The leader told him he couldn't stop something like that. The shield user said it didn't matter. If they stayed together, everyone would die. The leader cursed and grabbed the priestess by the shoulder, telling her to move. She dropped her light shield, face falling, and told the rest of us to follow her. The three pale-faced girls ran after her, the archer covering us with arrows as he retreated. I glanced at the shield user once, said nothing, and kept moving. The leader clapped him on the shoulder one last time. "See you, friend," and didn't look back. The shield user answered quietly, then let out a roar and slammed his sword against his shield again and again. The wolves chasing us suddenly veered off, ignoring their rider's commands, drawn straight toward him instead. The priestess's voice cracked as she told us not to stop. His stand wouldn't buy us much time. She and the shield user were close. Everyone could tell. Nobody spoke after that. We just ran. Minutes, or maybe longer later, wolf howls rose up again from behind us. One of the girls stumbled in fear, about to fall. I caught her arm and told her to be careful. She thanked me, shaking. "Don't stop. Keep moving," I told her. "I can't run anymore. Just leave me. Go on without me," she said, tears welling up. I didn't answer. I just grabbed her around the waist and tucked her under my arm, carrying her while I kept running at full speed. "Leo, put me down." "Carrying me? You won't make it either," she whispered. I ignored her and kept going. Then the leader suddenly stopped running. "Keep going. Don't stop," he shouted to the priestess. She faltered for a second, then kept moving forward. The archer stopped too. "When you get back to town, make sure everyone hears what happened here, and don't forget to mention how heroic we were." The leader snapped at him, asking what he thought he was doing. The archer shot back that a wounded man alone couldn't hold off pursuers either. The leader cursed at him, telling him not to regret it when he was dead. The archer joked back that without a good guide like him, the leader would never find his way to the afterlife. The leader cursed again, then called out to me. "Kid, take care of them for us." I didn't turn around, but I answered him, my voice carried back on the wind. Hearing it, the leader relaxed a little. He drew the sword Tom had returned to him. "Old friend, looks like this might really be it for us." He admitted it bothered him, leaving the priestess in the hands of some village kid. The archer knocked an arrow. "That village kid is stronger than either of us. She's saved both our lives before. This is just paying her back. Strong enough to beat a goblin hero? What a garbage job this turned out to be. That's adventuring for you. You never know what the next job brings." The leader sighed, old faces of past comrades flickering through his mind. "Just a little longer, friends," he murmured. In the dark, shapes were closing in fast. The final fight was about to begin. Wolf howls chased us from behind. The goblin riders hadn't left everyone behind to deal with our rear guard. The girl I'd been carrying was back on her own feet, running under her own power. Everyone else was gasping for air after so long on the run, but I barely broke a sweat. My stamina was better than anyone else's out here. If I really pushed, I could have left them all behind without much trouble. There's a saying, you don't have to outrun the enemy, just your friends. Some cold, logical part of my brain kept whispering it. Leave them. Leave everyone. I'm no saint, but I'm not that kind of garbage either. Not the type to abandon women and run off alone to save myself. Keep a low profile, grow stronger quietly. That had always been my plan. When Tom died, it scared me. When the shield user stayed behind, I went quiet, because I knew I didn't have that kind of courage in me. When the leader and archer stopped to hold the line too, I still didn't stop running. I told myself adventurers get paid to take these risks. I didn't know anyone that. But the leader had asked me anyway. And somehow, I'd said yes without even thinking about it. Now it was time to make good on it. Keep running. Don't stop, I told the others, and planted my feet, staring back toward the village. Shapes were already forming in the dark. One of the girls called out my name. I told her to listen and keep moving. The priestess grabbed her hand and swore in the goddess's name she'd get them somewhere safe, then pulled her forward. As they left, the girls called back for me to be careful. Don't worry, I said. I'm not planning on dying tonight. I stepped into the middle of the road, planted my feet apart, and a spear appeared in my hand from storage. Come on then, you green rats. Come see what I've got. 6 wolf riders emerged, howling and screeching, trying to scare me. It didn't work. I flipped the spear into a throwing grip and let it fly the moment the lead rider got close. It was too fast to dodge. The wolf went down screaming, and its rider's neck snapped on impact. The rest charged in fury, spears raised, wanting to skewer me for killing their friend. I blasted them with my freezing beam as they closed in. Wolves have fur, so the cold hit them a little less, but it still slowed them enough. My mana was draining fast, but so was their speed. Die, trash, I snarled, and hit them with my piercing thrust. The spear punched clean through the goblin on the nearest wolf's back. I ripped it free and swung the body into another rider, sending both goblins and a wolf crashing together in a heap. I kicked the next slowed wolf hard enough to snap its spine. Spinning, I threw the spear and dropped another rider, then scooped up a fallen spear and charged the next wolf. I yanked a goblin off its mount with my grip spell, sending it flying toward me screaming, right onto the spear waiting for it. I ripped the blade free, trailing blood and guts, then threw it again and skewered a loose wolf nearby. I didn't stop moving. As I passed the last goblin still struggling to get up, my sword flashed once and its head went flying. The final wolf, riderless now, howled and bolted into the wilderness. I finished off the wounded goblins and wolves still twitching on the ground, then spat on the pile of corpses and let out a breath. I hadn't expected to walk away from 6 wolf riders without a scratch. I'd grown faster than I ever imagined. I felt myself level up again, gaining new strength. I gathered my spears back from the bodies and spent what coin I had left on more skill rolls. Got a poison spray I didn't love, a speed boost I liked better, a lightning touch spell that hit armored enemies extra hard, and finally, a frost arrow spell that needed a higher magic skill to use. That last one made me grin. I waited a bit, but no more goblins came, and neither did the leader or the archer. I figured they must have actually held the line. Either way, the chasers were dead, the girls were safe, and I'd kept my promise to the leader. I felt good about myself. The moonlight seemed brighter somehow. The rough dirt road ahead looked clearer than before. As I ran, a faint, sweet, metallic smell drifted past on the breeze. I looked up and felt a rage build in my chest I couldn't put into words. 3 broken shapes lay in the middle of the road ahead. The face closest to me, I recognized instantly. I'd carried her on my back not long ago. The trail of blood dragging behind them told me everything. Someone had killed them, then dragged their bodies out here on purpose, like a display. Beyond them stood something over 3 meters tall, blocking the road. It saw me and slowly raised its left hand. The priestess was in its grip, her body twisted wrong, still shaking. She looked at me and her lips moved, no sound coming out, but I understood anyway. I'm sorry. Run. The goblin hero let out a booming laugh, looking like something crawled straight out of hell under the moonlight. I didn't say a word. I didn't know how this thing had gotten ahead of us without a sound. But I wasn't running. I never planned to. I raised my spear at it with my right hand. My left hand clenched, and cold poured out of it like my fury made visible. Without any warning, I blasted it with the freezing beam. It raised its left arm to block, using the priestess's twisted body as a shield. I didn't stop. I tilted the beam up and hit its face instead, frost crawling fast across its skin. Die, it growled, speaking in the common tongue, and slammed its arm forward. The priestess's broken body crashed into my chest. Pain exploded through me, and I staggered back several steps. Then I heard it, a massive roar of air as the goblin hero swung its huge spiked club down at me. The club slammed into the ground, throwing up rocks that stung my face, but I stayed calm. I dodged out of range, laid the priestess down gently, spun my spear, and charged forward, blasting it with my freezing beam again. This thing wasn't like the others. The cold that had frozen a big goblin solid barely slowed it down. The frost on its skin cracked off with one shrug. It roared and swung its club. I dodged sideways, and the club crashed into the dirt where I'd been standing. I kept feeding cold energy into my left hand while dodging strike after strike, then thrust my palm forward and formed a half-meter ice arrow. It punched straight through the goblin hero's right shoulder before it could react, then exploded, freezing half its body solid. Its massive club dropped from its hand. For the first time, I saw disbelief in its eyes. I moved like lightning, driving my spear forward with everything I had. The crude iron spearhead tore through its armor, muscle, and bone, inches from its heart, until a massive hand caught the shaft and held it there. I screamed and pushed with everything I had, the spear groaning under the strain. Then I let go, grabbed my sword instead, and swung a crescent slash across its throat like thunder. Its fist caught me in the chest at the same moment. I flew backward like a kite with its string cut. The goblin hero staggered forward, blood pouring from its throat, and collapsed face first. I coughed up blood. I was wearing nothing but thin cloth, and that punch had hit me square on. If I hadn't grown stronger tonight, that single blow would have killed me or crippled me for life. I spat out a mouthful of blood and forced myself over to the body, grabbing its head. Mana poured out of my hand, and its corpse shriveled up before my eyes. A walnut-sized green crystal formed in my palm when I was done. I pulled out the almond-sized healing stone I'd made earlier and swallowed it whole. Warmth flooded through my body instantly. My cracked ribs throbbed as they knit back together. Gritting through the pain, I got up and went to check on the priestess. She was barely breathing, slipping away. I forced her mouth open and shoved the healing stone I'd drained from the goblin hero down her throat. I didn't get up until I watched it dissolve into green light inside her. Then I sat down hard, looking at the 3 bodies nearby. It hadn't taken long at all for things to go from alive to gone. I couldn't figure out how that goblin hero had gotten ahead of us without anyone noticing, unless it had been lying in wait here the whole time. But why? I shook my head, trying to push the feeling away. A cough sounded beside me. The priestess, who'd been minutes from death, was breathing again thanks to the stone. "I'm not dead?" she asked, confused. Her whole body had been nearly crushed. Without a temple's healing magic immediately, she should have died for certain. "You got lucky," I told her. "They didn't." She looked over at the bodies and lowered her head. "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect them. That's not on you," I said. "Tell me how that thing got ahead of us." She shook her head, pale, just remembering it. "I don't know. It was already waiting there when we saw it." I asked if she could stand. She tried and immediately sat back down in pain. The healing stone had saved her life, but she was far from fully healed. "Wait here," I told her, and walked over to the goblin hero's shriveled corpse. I raised my sword and took its head off, not out of anger, but because what happened here needed proof when I reported it. I hung the head from my belt, then lifted the priestess onto my back. I took one last look at the girls' broken bodies, breathed in the smell of blood one more time to remember it, and carried the priestess toward Hilltown. Morning arrived calm and bright over Hilltown. Farmers and merchants were already setting up to sell their goods, adventurers coming and going through the gates like any other day. People started staring the moment they saw what hung from my belt. "What is that thing on his waist?" "Is that a goblin head?" "It's huge." One sharp-eyed adventurer recognized it immediately, a goblin hero. Something only a silver rank adventurer could handle alone, and Hilltown didn't have anyone above bronze rank. I ignored the stares and walked straight to the gate guard. I told him Kasong village had been hit by a goblin army and I was here to report it, then held up the head as proof, telling him I didn't think it was even their leader. He stammered and said he'd get the knight in charge right away. I asked if someone could carry the priestess to the temple. He ordered 2 guards to take her there and told me to wait. Soon, a man in armor arrived. He asked to see the proof. I held up the head. He examined it closely and asked why it looked so shriveled. I told him it was a side effect of one of my abilities. He introduced himself as Sir Wayne Evans, in charge of the town's defense. I gave him my name, Leo, the sole survivor of Kasong village. He led me to his office and I told him everything that happened. He frowned, saying that if there really was a goblin army out there, this was a serious problem. Normally monster threats around here were small enough for adventurers to handle. Something like this, with a goblin hero involved, was way beyond what the town could deal with, and the town's own garrison was stretched thin. Sending word to the City of Zakia for help would take over 10 days just to get a response, and he doubted they'd bother sending troops for what sounded like a few hundred goblins. What bothered him more was that the goblin hero had somehow gotten ahead of us and been lying in wait. Goblins weren't supposed to be smart enough to plan an ambush like that, unless something else was pulling the strings behind them. He looked at me and said he was sorry for what happened to my village, but he couldn't offer support. I asked him how he could just let an entire village disappear and do nothing. He said the town's defense had to come first, and that self-governing villages like mine were always responsible for their own safety. I sat down, out of arguments. He said he'd send scouts to look into things, and asked me to leave the goblin hero's head with him. Maybe it would be enough proof to convince the city to send real help. I sighed and let it go. There was nothing left to say. Walking out of the guard post, the sun felt too bright in my eyes. It was the second time I'd looked up at it since this all started. The first time, I'd learned this world could be cruel. This time, I learned it wasn't just cruel, it was indifferent. A whole village wiped out, and all I got in return was a promise to maybe send help someday. Self-governing villages like mine pay a fixed tax to whatever lord or city technically claims the land, usually around a fifth of what the village earns. Beyond that, nobody owes labor or extra fees. The trade-off is simple. If monsters or bandits attack, you're on your own. Hilltown worked the same way, technically under Zakia's authority, but far enough away that the city mostly ignored it. So Sir Evans protecting the town instead of my village wasn't really wrong of him. I couldn't blame him for that. I stopped by the temple first. They told me the chief had already taken the treated villagers back home yesterday morning, probably trying to save on lodging costs. Didn't take much to guess how that ended, considering they walked straight back into a goblin army. I also asked about the priestess and was told she was under the head priest's care and out of danger. I left the temple and wandered Hilltown with no real destination, just thinking about what came next while I looked the place over. It wasn't much. One street that looped back around to where it started. Near the middle was an open square with a big sign showing a bed and a cup, marking the local inn and tavern. Might as well eat, I told myself. I'd already done everything I could. I wasn't about to march on a goblin army by myself. Inside, a bard was playing something light and cheerful. I told the innkeeper I needed a room and food. She asked what kind of room, and I glanced down at my filthy clothes and messy hair and asked if they had one with a bath. She laughed and said no, but there was a public bathhouse in town if I wanted to clean up properly. I took a single room instead, 30 copper a night, with laundry service for another 10. I handed over a silver coin. She recommended the house specials, bean stew and a cheese vegetable pie, 30 copper for both. I said sure, and she called over a girl named Corey to bring it out. The stew was simple, beans and meat cooked soft, seasoned with just salt and thyme, but it was good. The pie was mushroom, leek, onion, and cheese baked into dough. Not fresh out of the oven, but the mushrooms were flavorful and the cheese had a nice tang. Compared to the hard rye bread back home, it was a completely different world. I ate like I hadn't eaten in days while the bard played, and for the first time in a while, I actually felt myself relax. I even tossed a copper coin to the bard as a tip when I finished. After that, I headed to the bathhouse. The hot water felt incredible after everything my body had been through. I finally let myself unwind. Back at the inn, my room was tiny, just a bed a little over a meter long against the wall, a threadbare blanket, straw poking through the mattress. Not great, but livable. I handed my bloody clothes to the innkeeper for washing, and she promised they'd be clean by morning. The next morning, roosters woke the town at first light. My third day in Hilltown. I was already used to waking early, so I got up, washed up, and did some light training. Even with my stat points doing most of the work, keeping my body sharp still mattered. Breakfast was simple: dark bread, barley porridge, 2 fried eggs, 10 copper total. Cheap and filling. Afterward, I counted what I had left: 2 silver and a handful of copper. Not much. Working a normal job in town paid next to nothing, a few dozen copper a day at best. That left one real option, the obvious one in a world like this: the Adventurers Guild. I went back early this time. While staff were still posting new jobs, and a few early adventurers stood around chatting near the board. I walked up to the counter and said I wanted to become an adventurer. 2 days of rest and a proper bath had done wonders. I actually looked presentable now. The counter girl smiled and explained that new adventurers had to pass a trial first, to make sure they wouldn't waste people's contracts. I asked what the trial involved. She said killing 5 or more small monsters, goblins, fishmen, that kind of thing, or one adult beast, and bringing back proof. Teams were fine, but buying your way through was grounds for disqualification. I almost laughed. I'd lost count of how many goblins I'd killed by now, but it was easily several times 5. She noticed my expression and added that professionals with proven skills could skip the trial. I asked what counted as proven. In answer, I clenched my left hand and let cold mist curl out between my fingers, then flicked a beam at a bug flying nearby. It froze solid midair and dropped to the floor as a chunk of ice. Her eyes lit up. A mage? Close enough, I figured, and didn't bother correcting her. She practically snatched up the paperwork, telling me the registration fee was 1 silver. A real spellcaster registering in a town this small was a big deal, especially one who looked young and sharp. I paid without hesitation and filled out the forms. Thankfully, my foster father had taught me enough letters to manage that part fine. Not long after, I had my adventurer's proof, a small gray-white tag. The counter girl walked me through the ranking system. The guild was a continent-wide organization, and ranks carried over everywhere. From bottom to top, white wood, gray hide, black iron, bronze, silver, gold, mithril, and orichalcum. Bronze and below were ordinary adventurers taking jobs off the board. Silver were seasoned experts handling specialized contracts. Gold were the best of the common ranks, usually working deep dungeons. Mithril were rare, powerful figures who moved unpredictably. Orichalcum was practically legend. Heroes out of stories, nothing more. I stood in front of the job board, scanning for something worth taking. Hilltown didn't have much. Most postings came from villagers nearby, and anything decent had already been snatched up. Made sense, since the town's best adventurers were only bronze rank. Anyone with real skill either went to the big cities or headed straight into the misty forest. You're new too, right? Want to join our team? I turned to find a girl with a high ponytail and long legs, a hunting bow slung over her back, watching me with bright, confident eyes. Beside her stood a shorter girl carrying a wooden shield half her size and a hand axe at her belt. When she noticed me looking, she blushed and dropped her gaze, clearly shy. I saw what you did back there. You're a mage, right? The ponytail girl glanced at the sword on my hip and hesitated. That's right, I said simply. We picked up a job clearing goblins near a village, supposedly around 20 of them. I raised an eyebrow at that. East side, near a hill by Kulu village. Pays 10 silver. The moment I heard the pay, I understood exactly why a couple of rookies had landed this job. 10 silver wasn't worth the risk to anyone experienced. Goblins might be weak individually, but they still killed people, and no serious team would bother for that little. A solo adventurer wouldn't touch it either, too risky alone. Jobs like this sat untouched until they turned into a real problem, and then villages ended up paying 10 times as much once the goblin numbers grew out of control. Rookies were the only ones desperate enough to take the bad deals. I agreed anyway. The pay was low, but I figured teammates mattered more right now, especially other newcomers without the baggage veterans carry. And if they happened to be pretty, well, that wasn't exactly a downside. Great, let's head out right away, the ponytail girl said happily. Under a clear sky, we walked winding roads through rolling hills. The ponytail girl, Mary, I learned, talked nonstop the whole way, telling me how some fat pig of a village elder had tried to make her his 4th wife, and how she'd walked out of that village for good after that. The shorter girl wasn't actually short, not by her people's standards. She was a dwarf, though at nearly 5 feet tall, way above the usual dwarf height of 4 feet or so. Nobody would have guessed it without being told. Her name was Alika. Mary kept talking, explaining how she'd met Alika, and the two of them had passed the adventurer trial together. Mr. Leo, can you use a sword? Alika asked, her voice soft and gentle, nothing like the loud, rowdy dwarf stereotype I'd grown up hearing about. A little, I said, then asked what had been on my mind. I thought dwarves were usually, well, my foster father used to describe dwarves as short and built like square blocks, regardless of gender. I'm half-dwarf. My father was a dwarf, my mother human. Alika said plainly, clearly used to explaining it before people finished asking. Sorry, I said. Mixed-race children weren't exactly welcomed in most places here. Some people threw around ugly words for them. It's fine. Dwarves aren't like elves about it. They don't mind half-dwarves much. If anything, they were happy I turned out this tall. Still didn't get as tall as my mother, though. How tall was your mother? Mary jumped in. A little taller than Mr. Leo. Wow, that's really tall, Mary said, glancing my way. I stood around 5'9", tall for a human man. Mary herself was about 5'5", tall for a woman around here. So where are your parents now? You never mentioned them, Mary asked, unable to resist. They disappeared. They went to investigate a shadowy dungeon 2 years ago and never came back, Alika answered, her voice dropping. Oh, Alika, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Mary caught herself too late. It's fine. I became an adventurer to follow in their footsteps. Don't worry, I'll always be with you, Mary said, pulling her into a hug. I kept quiet, thinking privately that the three of us made a strange little group. All orphans, one way or another. This should be it, Mary said, poking a foul-smelling pile of droppings with a stick. Her father had been a ranger and taught her plenty before he died. She waved us forward. We found a dark, damp cave entrance ahead. This is their hideout. Let's go wreck them, Mary said eagerly. Wait, I said, stopping the two of them before they could charge in. Let me check what we're dealing with first. I triggered my scan. A map of lines unfolded in front of me. One main tunnel branching off again and again, forking multiple times. Not a deep cave, but clearly built with escape routes in mind. I memorized the layout before waving them forward. You have detection magic? Mary asked. Something like that, but the range is short. Then let's send these disgusting things straight to hell, Mary said, pulling out a torch and lighting it. Alika said nothing, just raised her shield and moved forward. At the first fork, I called out, right here. A little further, another fork. Straight ahead. We hadn't gone far into the next tunnel when chattering voices echoed from up ahead. They've spotted us, I said. Alika raised her shield and readied her axe. Mary backed up several steps. Leo, this one's on you and Alika. I'll light the way. I nearly rolled my eyes. The loudest one in the group turned out to be the one hiding behind everyone else. I scanned again. The map lit up, 7 or 8 red dots ahead, for more circling in from another tunnel, and at least 20 more clustered in a large space deep in the cave. Whoever gave out this job had lied about the numbers, or just didn't know better. No wonder the veteran skipped it. If you're not paying enough, you can't expect accurate intel either. Heads up, more are coming from behind us too, I said, drawing my sword. We're surrounded, Mary's voice wavered. Just a few, I said, and stepped forward as a crescent of silver light flashed through the dark. Late afternoon light filled the guild. The counter girl handed the reward over, 8 silver after fees. Mary snatched it up happily and split it. 3 for me, 3 for Alika, 2 for herself. I took my share with a smile. Mary talked way too much, but she kept the mood light, and honestly it helped me forget about everything that had gone wrong before. Same time tomorrow, Mary asked, hopeful. Alika stayed quiet, but her eyes said the same thing. I could tell they were both impressed with me. A mage who could spot enemies before they struck, fought just as well with a blade as any warrior, and could freeze a group solid so Mary could finish them off with her old sword. Only the part where I'd had to crush the goblin pups seemed to unsettle them a little. I agreed to team up again. Honestly, I liked what I'd seen from both of them too. Mary's chatter and sharp eyes for tracking made her useful, and her nerve wasn't bad either. Alika impressed me even more. Small as she was, she hit like a truck. That iron-banded shield of hers sent goblins flying into walls, and she handled that clumsy hand axe like it was second nature. She even knew how to taunt enemies into attacking her. I'd bet she was already close to as tough as that shield user I'd lost back at Kasong. Great. See you in the morning, I said, and we split up, only to run straight back into each other minutes later at the town's one and only inn. Guess we don't have to wait until morning after all, I said. Since we'd all just arrived in town, running into each other again wasn't exactly shocking. I offered to buy dinner, feeling generous. Really, Mr. Leo? Alika asked shyly. Of course. It's an honor to treat 2 lovely ladies, I said, giving them a clumsy little bow. Might as well get to know my new teammates properly. Finding capable partners on my very first job wasn't something that happened often. Most of the guild was either greasy old veterans or arrogant kids who thought too highly of themselves. You said it yourself, Leo. Don't regret this later, Mary teased, clearly enjoying herself. Relax, I'm not the kind of guy who can't afford dinner, I said, patting my chest confidently. How much damage could 2 girls really do to my wallet? I regretted that confidence pretty quickly. Mary was fine. 2 plates of the house special and a mug of ale left her hiccuping in full. Alika was a different story entirely. She was already on her 8th plate and showed no sign of slowing down. Too polite to keep ordering the expensive stuff, she started filling up on cheap dark bread instead. Thanks for coming in. That'll be 4 silver, 50 copper, the innkeeper said cheerfully, collecting payment. We agreed to meet up again in the morning and headed to our rooms. Back in mine, I counted what was left in my pocket, a few dozen copper. Not only had today's job barely paid off, I'd spent even more on dinner than I'd earned. If tomorrow's job went the same way, I'd be sleeping in the stables with the animals. And I still needed better gear. My sword already had a notch in the blade. A cheap starter weapon like this couldn't take much more abuse. At least I still had a couple of spears stored away as backup. I checked my sword skill, 8 out of 20 toward the next level. A few more jobs, and it would level up. I dropped onto the bed and let my mind wander until I passed out. Elsewhere, northwest of Hilltown, a village that should have been sleeping peacefully was living a nightmare instead. Villagers were being dragged from their homes. Anyone who fought back was killed on the spot. The rest were bound with rope and marched off toward the western mountains like livestock. 2 powerful goblin heroes escorted a small goblin in a black robe toward the village entrance, where a hooded figure stood waiting, face hidden in shadow. The small goblin approached, speaking fluent common tongue with an oily, flattering tone, reporting that they were capturing humans exactly as instructed. The hooded figure said everything was proceeding according to plan and that its efforts wouldn't be forgotten. The goblin bowed lower, pledging its loyalty. The hooded figure raised a hand, and a blue portal opened in front of it. Before stepping through, it paused, asking about the last batch of materials. The goblin reported the first stage of processing was complete. The figure told it to hurry. More soldiers were needed. Then stepped through the portal and vanished. The moment it was gone, the small goblin turned and barked orders at the goblin heroes, who visibly flinched with fear despite their size and strength. Back at the guild the next morning, new jobs had just gone up on the board, and adventurers were already crowding around to grab the best ones before anyone else could. Guild rules kept things fair by rank. Lower ranks couldn't take jobs above their level, but higher ranks could freely scoop up lower-tier work if it suited them. Veteran adventurers liked to check the easy board first, and if something decent showed up, they'd swoop in without any shame. Kid, we saw that one first, a greasy, balding middle-aged adventurer said, reeking of last night's drinking, sizing up the 3 of us like we were nothing. Nearby adventurers who'd already claimed their own jobs started murmuring, clearly enjoying the show. Apparently this guy and his crew had a habit of stealing easy jobs from rookies, and everyone knew it. Someone muttered that he'd been stuck at Black Iron rank for years because he never bothered improving. Someone else squinted at me, saying I looked familiar somehow. I stayed calm and told the balding guy his group was Black Iron rank and should be taking Black Iron jobs, not bothering with rookie postings. I picked up the job listing, clearing a small group of fishmen near a village, 30 silver reward. A rare good find for newcomers like us. Hey, you're new around here, aren't you? You don't know our team only takes fishmen jobs? He snapped, annoyed. Mary tugged at my sleeve nervously. Leo, maybe we should just let them have it. She was clearly intimidated by the Black Iron rank. Listen to your girl and hand it over, the greasy guy said, eyeing both girls in a way that made my skin crawl. Actually, if you really want it that bad, how about your girl here keeps us company for a... He didn't finish that sentence. If you want to keep going, you'll need to get past my magic first, I said, raising my left hand as ice crystals formed in the air, cold radiating off it. The greasy leader clutched his frost-bitten mouth, panic in his eyes. A mage? One of the watching adventurers called out loudly, recognizing me. The guy who'd walked into town with a goblin hero's head hanging from his belt. That was all it took. The 3 of them folded instantly, suddenly claiming they were bored of fishmen jobs anyway and happy to let us have it. Their friends echoed the excuse with fake laughter. I ignored their little performance, registered the job at the counter, and left with the girls. Mary couldn't stop gushing about how cool I'd looked. Alika, sharper than Mary gave her credit for, asked if I'd really killed a goblin hero. I admitted it, calling it luck. Mary wanted to know everything. What a goblin hero even was. where I'd learned magic, who my parents were, and kept firing questions the whole walk to the job site. We reached the Agate River, which cut through the whole Zakia plain, lined with small villages. No actual agates in it, just a mess of fishmen, aggressive, amphibious little monsters, barely a meter tall, but just as vicious as goblins. They built nests along the banks and attacked anything that got close to their territory. The village that hired us had already lost people to them, and if we didn't clear the nest before winter hatching season, things would only get worse. Their nests were easy to spot, crude little huts made of reeds and branches. I was surprised they even bothered building shelter at all. Mary explained that once the river froze in winter, fishmen would hole up inside to stay warm. She warned that provoking even one would bring the whole group swarming. She'd learned that the hard way as a kid, sneaking up to attack a fishman camp near her old village and nearly getting killed for it. The only real danger she mentioned was a type that could spit water, painful, but not lethal. With about 30 fishmen in the nest, I split up the job. Someone fast needed to lure them out into the open since the wet, slippery ground near their nest wasn't good for us. I looked at Mary. She glanced at Alika, who just blinked back innocently, and Mary sighed and volunteered. I sent her off with an encouraging pat on the shoulder while Alika and I set up on a nearby hillside. High ground meant the short-legged fishmen would struggle to climb up at us. Before long, Mary came sprinting out of the brush with a whole pack of fishmen chasing her, one of them still furious with a cheap arrow stuck uselessly in its skull. Their weapons were sharpened fish bones. Mary scrambled up the hillside fast. The fishmen didn't slow down even seeing reinforcements. They screeched and charged. One blue-skinned fishman spat a jet of water that splashed off Alika's raised shield. I told Mary to handle the spitters and blasted the next one that opened its mouth, freezing solid ice right into its throat mid-spit. An arrow followed instantly, punching through its eye and dropping it belly up. The rest turned toward Alika, and I hit the group with another sweep of freezing beam, coating their slick bodies in frost and slowing them down. I dropped down into the middle of them, and my blade flashed in a crescent arc. Bodies flew apart in bloody halves. Another slash followed right after. Later, around a crackling campfire, skewers of fishmen meat turned slowly over the flames. "You two are actually eating that?" I asked, watching the girls happily grilling away. It wasn't that I minded roasting fish. It was that these things had just tried to kill us an hour ago. Alika had wanted to cook a few heads too, but one look at those glassy, rolled-back eyes and I shut that idea down fast. She pouted but gave up on the head roast. "This tastes pretty good, kind of like frog," Mary said, turning a leg over the fire with obvious appetite. Alika agreed quietly. I'd eaten frog before, and fish before, but never a frog-flavored fishman, strong stomach or not. Something about eating a creature that could think and fight back still didn't sit right with me. "They're basically just fish with legs, Leo. Are you scared?" Mary teased, holding up a charred leg. "Try it, it's actually really good." The smell of roasted meat drifted over, and against my better judgment my mouth watered a little. "You burned it," I said, shaking my head. "You've got to flip it faster so the fat spreads evenly. That's how you actually grill something right." "Alika, stop piling on wood. Charcoal gives you a better sear." "All right, move aside. Let me show you two how real grilling is done." Silver moonlight flashed, and fishmen flew through the air in pieces. I felt myself grow stronger. My sword skill leveled up again, boosting my speed and damage, and my level climbed too, adding to my strength, agility, and stamina. The cost to gamble for new magic had gone up again. I sighed. Mary, busy picking out the best cuts of fishman meat for grilling, noticed and wandered over asking if I was tired of killing fishmen. I told her no, I was just sighing about being broke. She mentioned she'd saved up 40 silver from all these easy, well-paying jobs, and guessed I must have even more. I told her mages burn through money fast. She offered to lend me some, and Alika, just back with firewood, offered the same. I told them I'd let them know if I needed it. I wasn't too proud to accept help when it mattered. They went back to gathering food while I pulled out a big pot from storage and filled it with clean water using a water creation spell, one I'd swapped out for an old grip spell. Since my ice magic already covered close combat well enough, having clean water on demand was useful for the whole group, and it let me practice magic on the side, even if the skill grew slowly. I set the pot to boil and turned to my next skill roll. The price had jumped to 10 silver. First roll got me a spell that slowed falling speed. Useless unless I planned on jumping off a cliff, so I re-rolled. Second roll got me something better, a spell that could wrap a metal weapon in flame for a short time. I grinned. Getting something decent on only my second try, with barely 50 silver to my name, felt like a win. Mary came back with an armful of ingredients and asked me to wash them. Happy with my luck, I aimed my hand and blasted out a stream of water, soaking her completely along with the food. "Hey," she yelped, drenched head to toe. Watching her like that only improved my mood further. Alika asked, confused, if we were just playing with water now. I told her it was an accident. The stream came out stronger than I meant. Then told Mary she should hurry and dry off before she caught a cold. She just glared at me in silence. Later, at the weapon shop in Hilltown, the owner was loudly hyping his goods, claiming his spears could pierce anything and his shields could block anything. Alika deadpanned, asking if his spear could pierce his own shield. He laughed it off awkwardly. I checked out a well-forged spear, sharp and clearly better than the crude ones I'd looted off goblins. Then I picked up a proper arming sword, a meter long, usable one- or two-handed, clearly a step up from my old starter blade. The shopkeeper said it came from the best smith in town and wanted 120 silver for it. I put it back down. Mary was eyeing a hunting bow made from good oak and double-layered sinew, strong enough to take down a boar with the right arrows. The shopkeeper, spotting her interest, offered it to a pretty girl like her for 40 silver. Mary's eyes lit up until she heard the price and yelped. I picked up a spear and asked the price. 12 silver, he said. I told him that was practically dagger money. He argued his spear was worth far more than any cheap dagger. I asked about the bow and spear together. He did quick math and offered both for 52. I told him his sales pitch was better than his merchandise, and that the second-hand shop next door sold gear like this for a fraction of the price. He scoffed, insisting nothing there compared to his stock. I pointed out winter was coming and unsold bows would lose value fast once the season passed. He dropped to 50. I countered at 41. After some back and forth, I walked out having paid 46 silver for both the spear and the bow, plus 20 regular iron arrows at 20 copper each. The good steel-tipped heavy arrows were a silver apiece, way out of Mary's budget for now. Next was the armor shop. Mary already had her father's old leather jacket, and Alika wore a nicer studded leather set. So this stop was just for me. Unlike the boastful weapon dealer, the woman running this shop was all business. Take your time, no haggling here. The shop didn't have much selection. Cheapest option was padded cloth armor, layered linen inside for some protection against light weapons. Next up was hardened leather, good against slashing but weak to stabbing. After that, chainmail, solid protection and decent mobility, but around 10 kilos of weight. Top of the line was plate armor, thick cloth outside with steel plates sewn in, better protection than chainmail, but heavy and stiff. This small town didn't even stock actual plate. I ruled out chainmail and plate immediately, not because I couldn't carry the weight, but because even the cheapest short chainmail ran 500 silver and plate started at 600. Leather was out too. Even the cheapest chest piece was 50 silver, still more than I had. Alika offered to lend me the difference, but I turned her down. Padded armor suited me better anyway. It's what most low-rank adventurers and common soldiers wore. There were different grades depending on thickness and filling. With autumn setting in, I picked a mid-weight version lined with a linen wool blend, breathable but warm enough. 20 more silver gone. We've all leveled up to second-tier adventurers now, and Mary and I both got new gear. Should we take on tougher jobs tomorrow? I asked. Whatever you say, Leo, Mary said. Same here, Alika agreed. Both girls looked to me to lead the way. I scanned the job board, frowning. What's wrong? Mary asked. No goblin jobs. Not one. Strange, considering there was a whole goblin army out there somewhere. Mary shrugged. Doesn't matter. Those green rats never pay well anyway. Leo, look at this, Alika said, pointing to a posting. It was a hunting job. A village was being torn apart by an iron-thorn boar and its pack, a mid-tier beast strong enough to kill a bear once fully grown. The reward was only 20 silver, but the village was offering good money for the boar's body afterward, and for the smaller boars too. This one's good, let's take it. My dad killed one of these once, Mary said eagerly. I agreed and walked it up to the counter. The other adventurers eyeing the board backed off. Nobody wanted to pick a fight with the mage who'd walked into town carrying a goblin hero's head. At the village, a white-haired chief met us, furious. "Finally, someone's here. That damn beast just dragged off another one of ours." I told him to explain everything from the start. He said their turnip crop had been getting raided, and he'd assumed it was just wild piglets, so they'd set traps to catch them. Instead, an adult iron-thorn boar led the charge, gored one of his men to death on the spot, and now the whole village was marked. It had already dragged off and eaten 2 people. I asked when and where it usually showed up. He said dawn and dusk were the worst times, but it could appear any time, usually somewhere near the farmland. Nobody dared work the fields anymore. "We'll try to handle it today," I told him. "I'd be grateful," he said, then asked what price we'd pay for the boar carcasses. The undamaged pelt of the big one could fetch 80 silver, smaller boars 20 each, but only if the hide stayed intact. Damage the pelt, and the price dropped to 40. He explained the village paid part of its taxes in fine leather, and better hides meant bigger tax breaks. Normally hunters from the western hills brought them good pelts before winter, but this year none had shown up at all. I didn't say anything, but I had to guess why. West was exactly the direction the goblin army had come from. The fields were torn up badly. Mary crouched over hoofprints in the dirt, warning that this thing was big based on the tracks. Alika called out from the edge of the field. I walked over and found a strange pit, a raised mound of packed earth rising from the center of it. "Earth magic?" I said immediately. This wasn't natural. Mary caught up and confirmed it. The boar had gained an ability, which explained why it was bold enough to attack a whole village. I asked what that meant for us. She grinned, saying an ability meant a magic crystal inside it, worth even more money. Then Alika raised her shield sharply. I followed her gaze. A massive boar burst out of the brush nearby, huge tusks and bristling thorn-like fur along its back. Blood-red eyes locked on us. Green light flashed at its tusks. "Watch out!" I grabbed Mary and yanked her back hard. A spike of earth erupted from the ground right where she'd been standing. If I'd pulled her a second slower, she'd have been skewered. The boar squealed furiously at the miss, and more ordinary boars crashed out of the brush behind it. Hungry, fearless, eyes gleaming with something close to bloodlust. These things had gotten a taste for people. "Alika, taunt them. Mary, take the small ones." I blasted the big boar with my freezing beam while Mary jumped back, knocking an arrow in one smooth motion. The boar's eyes flashed green again. I dove sideways as another earth spike erupted where I'd been standing. Frustrated, it lowered its tusks and charged straight at me, unstoppable mass barreling forward. Alika triggered her taunt, and the whole herd, including the big one, veered off mid-charge and thundered toward her instead. I gathered ice into a half-meter arrow and fired. It punched straight into the boar's backside. It let out a horrible squeal, ice spreading blue across half its rear. While it was reeling, I grabbed my spear with both hands and drove a piercing thrust straight through the same spot. The spear tore clean through and the boar collapsed, legs kicking uselessly, blood and filth spraying from both ends. Arrows kept flying, dropping boar after boar. Alika braced against the charging pack with her shield, barely budging despite the impact, even slowed as they were by the frost. Mary fired again and again, dropping 2 more boars in quick succession. I tossed my spear aside, grabbed another from storage, and threw it straight into the next boar charging past me. I made clean water and blasted it over my spear. It had gone into the boar's guts, and the smell was too rank to put back in storage without washing it off first. Mary came back with a crowd of villagers. They lit up seeing the massive boar carcass and started reaching for their skinning tools right away. "Wait," I said, stopping them. "We haven't agreed on a price yet." The chief protested. "We'd already agreed on 80 silver. I told him that was the price for an ordinary iron thorn boar. This one had used an ability, meaning it carried a magic crystal inside, and its hide was still fully intact. That was worth more. One of the villagers got angry, accusing me of price gouging and threatening to just walk away and let me drag the corpse off myself. They figured there was no way I could actually move something that huge on my own, so they'd win either way. "Fine, I'll take it and sell it myself then," I said, and pressed my hand against the boar. My storage swallowed the whole carcass in an instant. The villagers froze in shock. I laid it out for them plainly. Winter was coming, and a boar this size, close to 2,000 pounds, would render out at least 500 pounds of smoked meat alone, even setting the hide aside. Smoked pork sold for $1 a pound in Hilltown. That's 500 silver right there, maybe 300 profit after costs. Add the crystal, the intact hide, and the tusks, and that was easily another 200 on top. So maybe you should reconsider your offer, I told them. The chief caved fast, begging me to sell it to them. I told him we could renegotiate. They could still make up their losses, just don't treat us like fools. I waved my hand, and the carcass reappeared. Walking away afterward, Mary was practically glowing, counting our 250 silver total out loud and already planning to buy some lavender soap she'd been eyeing. She asked why I hadn't just done what I described and sold it myself for more. I told her it wasn't worth the time and hassle, better to move on to the next job and leave the villagers a little profit too. Alika called me a good person for that. Mary agreed, saying she and Alika never would have landed a job like this without me, and she was happy to let me call the shots. Alika chimed in that without me, the two of them could never have beaten that boar alone. Mary suggested I take 100 silver and split the rest between her and Alika. I teased her about suddenly being good at math when money was involved, and Alika deadpanned that Mary only got smart when coins were on the line. Mary complained that made her sound dumb, and Alika and I just exchanged a look and nodded in agreement. A few jobs later, back in town, I treated the girls to dinner again. Mid-meal, Sir Evans showed up looking for me. The town lord wanted to see me about something important. I told the girls to keep eating and went with him alone, already suspecting what this was about. At the lord's estate, several people were already waiting. Sir Evans introduced me to the man at the center of the room. I'm Baron Havis Theo, Lord of Hilltown. State your name, young man. Leo, adventurer, I said simply, keeping it short. I didn't mention Kasong village. Technically Hilltown governed it, and I'd rather stand here as an independent adventurer than as some village's last survivor. I've heard of you. Word's been spreading about a talented young mage in town, the Baron said, skipping over Kasong entirely too. A village wiped off the map didn't carry nearly as much weight as a mage's reputation. People exaggerate. I'm still just a beginner, I said. Even the beginners people talk about that much tend to be worth watching, he replied, gesturing for me to sit. I took the seat without hesitation. I imagine you already know why Evans and I called you here. The Goblin Army, I said. He confirmed it. Several more villages west of here had already been wiped out, everyone taken. He'd sent 2 scouting teams and a squad of bronze-rank adventurers to investigate, and all of them had vanished the moment they entered the western mountains. So the town hadn't been sitting idle after all. He introduced the others in the room. Lord Bruce Donovan from Zakia City and his 3 advisors, all silver-rank adventurers. Donovan looked barely into his 20s, dressed in expensive full plate, a kite shield on his back and a knight's sword at his hip, the type noble women probably swooned over. He only gave a curt nod when introduced. The other 3 were a bespectacled young man in gold-threaded robes, a burly bearded man in chainmail carrying a heavy axe, and a sharply dressed young sorceress with a short staff. None of them bothered doing more than a token nod either. In a world where power decided everything, silver-rank adventurers didn't need to bow to lords. The only reason I was getting this kind of attention at all was the goblin hero's head I'd walked in with. They might doubt how strong I really was, but nobody was ready to write me off either. Baron Havis finally got to the point. I want you to join Lord Donovan's investigation team. Baron Havis said they'd already spoken to the priestess, Alice, who confirmed I'd saved her and witnessed me kill the goblin hero myself. That's why he wanted me on Lord Donovan's investigation team. He waved a maid forward with a bag of coins. 200 silver now, and 10 gold griffins once the job is done. Gold griffins were pure gold coins from the old empire, worth 100 silver each. That kind of money made me pause. Pay that high always meant danger to match. He explained my role would mostly be guiding them and passing along what I knew about the area. I thought it over for a second and agreed. High risk, high reward, plus a chance to watch real silver-rank fighters in action and maybe find out what happened to the villagers. I wasn't going to pass that up. They told me to be ready by morning. I said my goodbyes and left to prepare. First stop was expanding my storage space to 10 slots for 40 silver. Then I banged on the weapon shop owner's door well after closing. He stuck his head out the upstairs window, annoyed, until he realized I was a paying customer. Inside, I bought a proper arming sword and 4 more spears, haggling him down from 168 silver to 155. I picked up a few other supplies around town before heading back to the inn. I found Mary and Alika and told them about the job heading west. Mary immediately wanted to come along, but Alika pulled her back, pointing out that silver rank adventurers would be involved and we'd only slow things down. Mary sheepishly agreed once she thought about it. I told them it wasn't about not wanting them along. The Baron had specifically requested me. They should just rest up while I was gone. Alika said they'd wait for me before taking on new jobs. Mary stretched and declared she'd use the break to relax properly. The next morning, over a big breakfast, I pulled out my old sword and handed it to Mary, telling her hers was worse off than mine despite the notch in the blade. She took it, promising to look after it for me. Alika quietly asked how long I'd be gone. I told her I didn't know. A job worth 10 gold griffins probably meant it wouldn't be quick. 10 gold griffins, Mary said, odd. That's probably more than I'm worth if you sold me. Deal. I'll buy you with it when I get back, I said. Really? So I get to sit around and let you support me forever? No, I'd buy Alika instead. Her shield makes me feel safe. Alika nodded seriously. Buy me, not Mary. Mary slammed the table, annoyed at both of us. Sir Evans showed up right then, telling me the Lord and his group were already waiting at the gate. Guess that's my cue, I said, grabbing my pack and spear. Be careful, Leo, Alika said. Mary just looked worried and told me the same. I'll be fine. Just take care of yourselves. I'll be back before you know it, I said, and headed out. It was just a guiding job, nothing to worry about. The cart rolled fast down the road, fields blurring past on either side. You're really a mage? Lord Donovan finally asked, eyeing my gear. An arming sword at my hip, a spear in hand, cheap linen soldier's armor, and a big pack on my back. Nothing about me screamed spellcaster. The genuine article, my lord, I said with a shrug. The bespectacled advisor beside him muttered to himself, clearly turning the phrase over in his head, fascinated by it. Donovan scoffed, unimpressed. He'd overheard the priestess's account earlier and already knew my actual background was just a poor village kid. Still, an interesting phrase. Never heard it put quite that way, the young man said, pulling out a notebook and jotting it down. The sorceress, dressed sharply and speaking with a lazy, teasing edge, asked to see my magic. I raised my hand and let frost gather in the air. No incantation. A bloodline sorcerer, she guessed. Something like that, I said, deflecting. My foster father found me wandering the misty forest. Don't know who my real parents were. I see, she said, and let it drop with a faint smile. The 5 of us rode the rest of the way toward Kasong village in silence. We're here, my lords, the driver announced, reining in the horses. Stepping down, I looked at the quiet village and felt strange, like visiting somewhere from another lifetime. This is where you're from? Donovan asked, taking in the shabby little place. Used to be, I said. Quite the backwater, he muttered, already walking in. The others followed, and I fell in step behind them. I was still the guide here, whatever else I felt about it. The driver snapped the reins and turned the cart back the way we came. Walk us through it, kid, the bearded axe-wielder said. I pointed things out as we passed, the chief's longhouse, the communal oven, and so on. Just like Baron Havis said, everyone's gone, and they took everything worth carrying, food, valuables, all of it. Donovan eventually turned to his 3 advisors. This doesn't look like a normal goblin raid. Taking food makes sense. Why take valuables too? Maybe there's something orchestrating them. Each of them threw out theories. I spoke up. Could they be trading the valuables for weapons and gear? I'd noticed how well-equipped the goblins we fought had been. Donovan shot that down loudly. Who would sell weapons to goblins? I've seen their gear firsthand. It's good quality. And merchants chase profit. If there's money in it, someone will sell, I said. The bespectacled advisor agreed, adding that greedy merchants would sell out their own families for the right price. Donovan finally conceded and said, per the Baron's report, the missing scouts had all vanished somewhere in the western mountains. That's where they needed to start. He turned to me. You know the way into those mountains, don't you? Endless green mountains stretched ahead of us. At the base of them, we walked out of another empty village. No one here either. That's 4 villages now. Whatever the goblins want with all these people, it can't be good. Keep moving. Find the nest. I checked the sky. It'll be dark soon. We should rest here tonight, and push on tomorrow. Lord Donovan looked at his advisors. The bearded axe-wielder agreed. Moving at night out here was risky, and everyone needed rest for whatever tomorrow brought. So we headed back into the village and shut the gate behind us, picking a large house to hole up in. As the guide, I ended up handling most of the camp chores, though I didn't mind since I was already getting paid well for it. I gathered stones outside and started building a fire pit. The bearded man saw what I was doing and disappeared into a nearby house, coming back with an armful of chopped firewood. Once the fire caught, I pulled out a pot, filled it with clean water from my spell, then dug through my pack for smoked meat, dried mushrooms, and flour. I sliced the meat thin, rinsed the mushrooms, added a pinch of thyme, and let it all simmer together. I found a decent board, cleaned it off, and worked up some dough, kneading it before tearing off little dumplings and dropping them into the pot. "Is this how they cook in your village?" the bespectacled young man asked, watching curiously. "No, I made it up myself," I said without shame. "Nothing fancy comes out of a backwater village. Once we're back in Zakia, I'll treat you all to a real meal," Donovan said, curling his lip. I didn't take it personally. Some people just can't help themselves. Once the stew was ready, I pulled it off the fire and offered it around. The bearded man was first in line, asking the sorceress for utensils. The bespectacled one wanted a share too. The sorceress muttered something while touching a ring on her finger, and a small dark portal opened above it. She reached in casually and pulled out a set of silver plates, one even for me. Then she produced a bottle of wine so fine-looking it had to cost a fortune. I stared at my silver bowl and spoon, a little stunned. A space ring, and they ate off silver even out here in the wilderness. I glanced at the chopsticks I'd carved out of a stick and suddenly felt very much like a country bumpkin. The sorceress mentioned, almost offhand, that the ring couldn't preserve food, just store it. The bearded man took the first bite and his eyes lit up immediately. The smoky meat, the earthy mushrooms, the thyme all coming together with real depth, and the dumplings soaking up the broth had a satisfying chew to them. The other two tried it, and clearly enjoyed it too, even if they wouldn't say so outright. "Even if it's decent, it's still peasant food," Donovan muttered, digging into his bowl anyway, eyes narrowing slightly with each bite in a way that gave him away completely. After dinner, the sorceress offered to pour everyone wine. I turned mine down, drinking Cloud's judgment, and this deep and dangerous territory, I valued staying sharp more than expensive wine. The bearded man assigned watch shifts, himself and me for the first shift, the other two for the second, letting Donovan rest through the night. Donovan cut in, saying I could just take first watch alone since I wasn't expected to fight anyway. The bearded man shot that down, saying we were close enough to the mountains that pairs were safer. Donovan waved it off, not bothering to argue further. The others settled in and were asleep within minutes. Outside by the fire, the bearded man, Bulk, I learned, started talking. He told me Donovan was actually the illegitimate son of the Duke of Zakia. His mother had worked as a barmaid, and Donovan had taken plenty of beatings as a kid defending her honor before the Duke's men finally tracked them down and things changed. The attitude, though, never went away. Bulk told me not to take it personally. Donovan just liked to run his mouth. I asked why he was telling me all this. I was just a low-rank adventurer from nowhere, after all. Bulk laughed, saying only a fool would call someone who could cast spells without incantations and summon clean water on demand a nobody. He didn't want Donovan's attitude costing them a future mage's goodwill. I noted he seemed to know Donovan pretty well. Bulk admitted he'd grown up alongside Donovan's mother, though he made a point of clarifying he had a wife now, nothing improper going on. Then he admitted he'd actually had a small crush on her back then too, since she'd been the prettiest girl on their street. I asked if she hadn't liked him back. He said the opposite. He'd been the good-looking one on the block, but then some wandering adventurer took a liking to him and offered to make him an apprentice. He'd left on impulse, and by the time he came back to Zakia, Donovan was already a teenager. He sighed, wondering aloud if he'd stayed. Maybe he'd have a son my age by now. I pointed out he'd just said he had a wife. How old was his kid? He admitted, sheepishly, he didn't have kids yet. Just got married last year, to a girl who'd apparently fallen for him and insisted on marrying him. How old is she? I asked. 19, this year. I nearly choked on my tea. Looking at this bearded, weathered man in front of me, I genuinely could not find whatever charm had won over a 19-year-old. He kept bragging that he wouldn't have married so soon if she hadn't been so persistent, and he hadn't wanted kids himself. I decided to change the subject fast. Are all silver rank adventurers this rich? He said no. The space ring and silverware were all Sophia's personal stuff, not standard gear. Then he leaned in, lowering his voice. Sophia looked like she was in her 20s, but she was actually a witch, older than him. Never ask her age, he warned, raising a hand seriously. She'll lose it. Just then, the village gate exploded inward. What was that? The noise was loud enough that Donovan and the other two didn't need any warning. They were already outside. Big dumb goblin, Balk said, cracking his thick neck. That was the nickname strong adventurers used for the big goblins. All muscle, nothing else. The big goblin that had smashed the gate stumbled in, followed by a swarm of regular ones behind it. Let me warm up, Balk said, grabbing his heavy axe and charging in alone. I glanced at the other two, still yawning, showing no intention of helping. Aren't you two going to back him up? Relax, Balk's fine on his own, the bespectacled one said, unbothered. The sorceress calmly held Donovan back as he reached for his weapon. Balk leapt several meters into the air mid-charge and brought his axe down in one clean strike, splitting the big goblin clean in half from head to toe. Then he started spinning, axe extended, cutting through the swarm like a tornado. Limbs and gore flew everywhere. I couldn't help thinking of a children's rhyme about a windmill spinning round and round while I watched. In moments, the goblins were shredded, and the few survivors bolted in terror. Balk walked back with his axe over his shoulder, drenched head to toe in blood and gore. Kid, mind hosing me off? I blasted him with a jet of water, and he came out clean in seconds. Handy little trick, he said, grinning. All right, you three get some rest. You should rest instead. I'll take over the watch, Donovan told him. Balk gave him a look. Fine, but drop the attitude. Leo here's a good kid. Once the other three had gone to sleep, Donovan sat by the fire and asked what Balk had told me. Nothing, I said. He didn't push it, just reached over and flipped Balk's drying clothes over the fire so they'd dry evenly. The next morning, someone asked if I'd been through these mountains before. I hadn't. Nobody around here wandered into places like this without reason. Even seasoned hunters avoided going too deep. The bespectacled advisor, Leon, guessed the goblins from last night had been sent to test us, and noted that whatever was behind this was smarter than it looked, though he couldn't say why. Once we got deeper into the mountains, my job as guide became pretty useless. Balk took over, relying on years of experience navigating wilderness like this. He mentioned it reminded him of the last time he'd gone somewhere like this, 5 years back in the Misty Forest, hunting a cockatrice. I asked what the Misty Forest was actually like. After last night's conversation, Balk and I had gotten fairly comfortable with each other. He explained it was the only gateway into the demon realm, full of monsters and demons that crossed over from the other side. Dangerous, but rich with treasure, a place where plenty of adventurers died and plenty more struck it rich. He said going there was basically a rite of passage for any real adventurer. Donovan perked up at that, suggesting they all go together once this job wrapped up. Balk pointed out the Misty Forest was far from Zakia, and the Duke wasn't going to fund a joyride like that. Donovan mentioned he'd saved up some money of his own. Balk shot that down too. Even gold-rank adventurers could die in there, and he personally was past that kind of adventuring. Instead, he nodded toward me, suggesting Donovan try asking me. I declined immediately. I had no plans to go anywhere near that place. Balk teased Donovan that his Misty Forest dream might be dead before it even started. Donovan grumbled that some village kid with a few minor tricks probably wouldn't be much help anyway. Then Leon suddenly called out, pointing ahead. Everyone turned to look. A massive structure loomed in the distance, built into the mountainside. Ancient ruins? Balk said, studying the worn path leading straight to it. He turned to Donovan. You're the one in charge here. Do we turn back or push forward? Donovan frowned, thinking it over. If it really is a goblin army led by a hero, can we actually win? Balk nodded confidently, saying the odds looked good based on what we knew. I frowned at that. Sure, Balk had wiped out a swarm of weak goblins like it was nothing last night, but cannon fodder wasn't the same as fully armed goblin soldiers backed by a goblin hero. Then let's move, Donovan said. I'm not about to be the one who backs down. Besides, before I left Zakia, the old man gave me this. Our last resort if things go bad. He pulled a worn scroll from his coat, showed it briefly, then tucked it away. The Duke actually parted with something like that? Must think highly of you, Balk said. I'm one of only 2 children he has left. Even if I'm just a backup heir, he's not eager to see me die out here. Well then, Sophia, Leon, time to show what you've really got, Balk said, clapping his hands. Leon pressed his palms together. God of order, grant us strength against evil. Blessing. Light spread out from him, washing over everyone. Warmth and courage flooded through me. I felt my stamina and focus sharpen for a moment. He wasn't done. God of order, grant us protection from evil. Devout shield. A thin shimmering film settled over everyone's skin, some kind of force field that softened impacts when I tested it with my hand. The sorceress murmured something in a language I couldn't follow, waved her short staff, and called out, "Haste!" A green breeze wrapped around all of us. I felt lighter instantly, faster on my feet. Let's go kill those damn goblins, Balk said, hefting his axe and leading the charge toward the ruins. A fireball the size of a wash basin exploded in the middle of the goblin ranks, and a dozen goblin soldiers went up in flames instantly. They shrieked and stumbled for a few seconds before collapsing, still burning until nothing was left but char. I watched Sophia's fireball with pure envy. Now that was what a real mage looked like. Nearby, Balk was cutting a big goblin into pieces, several more already dead at his feet. Donovan stood shield up in front of the mages, sword ready. I held the rear with my spear, watching for anyone trying to sneak up on the spellcasters. The ruins looked massive from a distance, but were falling apart up close, riddled with holes goblins could pop out of any time. I'd already speared down a few trying to flank us. With my scan running, nothing could hide from me, and the others trusted me enough to leave their backs open. Sophia started chanting again, and another fireball tore through the goblin ranks. Even fully armored goblin soldiers went down the same as regular ones under magic like that. Then a sharp whistle cut through the noise, and the attacking goblins pulled back like a receding tide. On the platform ahead, a figure in a black robe stepped out, flanked by a small goblin and 2 goblin heroes. Sophia didn't hesitate. A burst of chanting, and a fireball shot straight for them. The blast lit up the air, smoke pouring everywhere. But I already knew it wasn't that easy. Smoke without a scream usually means nothing landed. When the smoke cleared, both the goblin and the hooded figure stood untouched. A pale blue shield flickered and dissolved as the small goblin lowered its hands. Well, visitors all the way out here, the hooded figure said, amused. The small goblin snarled at us for our rudeness. Balk snapped back that goblins were still the lowest form of vermin no matter how well they spoke, and he only had one way of greeting vermin, his axe. The small goblin started to lunge, furious, but the hooded figure told it to stand down. It obeyed instantly. If I'm not mistaken, you're the fierce witch out of Zakia, the figure said calmly, hands hidden in its sleeves. Sophia demanded to know who he was and how he knew them. I expected Zakia to send some ordinary scouting party. Sending named adventurers is a pleasant surprise, he said. That's how I found out their team had a name. Sophia demanded he surrender and release everyone he'd taken. Since you're here for them, Kuchi, show our guests your new recruits. The small goblin blew a whistle hard, several times. A moment later, heavy footsteps echoed from deep inside the dark ruins, and dozens of humanoid monsters burst out. I looked closer, and my stomach dropped. I recognized them. The bald leader. The village chief. People from Kasong. Their skin had turned purple-black, bodies swollen to twice their normal size, covered in oozing pustules leaking a sickly green fluid. Aberrations, Leon said, horrified. I asked quietly what that meant, whether they could be saved. Leon explained, disgusted, that dark magic corruption turned people into these things, and there had never been a case of reversing it. These are the ones you came looking for. Go ahead, test your strength against them, the hooded figure said. The whistle blew again, and the aberrations charged. Sophia, kill them. There's no saving them, Balk called out. Sophia's staff traced through the air as she chanted. The whistle sounded once more, and the creatures scattered, but her spell was faster. A fireball ignited several at once, setting off the fluid inside their pustules, and they burned to nothing in seconds. More kept coming. Cut off the heads, or they won't stay down, Balk shouted, and his axe swung clean through one, spraying green fluid everywhere. Wherever it landed, thin smoke curled up from the ground. He shook the fluid off his own body before it could burn through. The shield spell from earlier had protected him. His axe wasn't so lucky, smoke hissing off the blade with each hit. Donovan smashed one aside with his shield and took another's head off with his sword, his weapon suffering the same corrosion. Leon called on his order god again, summoning holy fire that ignited more aberrations, the same violent burst as they went up. This time, I didn't hold back at the rear. I moved to the front line, channeled fire into my spear tip, and locked eyes on the bald leader's twisted form. I hit him with my piercing thrust, closing several meters in an instant, driving the burning spearhead straight into his chest. The flame ignited the fluid inside him, and his body started glowing. "See you, old man," I muttered, ripping the spear free and flinging his body through the air. It exploded moments later. With the blessing and haste spells still active, I moved like lightning, the flaming spear cutting through the crowd like a blade of fire, igniting and launching one aberration after another. Behind me, Sophia and Leon had stopped casting. Even Bulk fell back to stand beside Donovan. I was the only one still fighting. "Is he really a mage?" Leon asked, doubt creeping into his voice. "Fighting like that, you could call him a spell blade and nobody would argue," Bulk said, planting his axe in the ground. "Rare. A battle mage," Sophia murmured. Donovan looked openly jealous, muttering about some backwater kid having a bloodline and talent like that out of pure luck. My spear found the chief next, the same man who'd fled to the back of every fight out of fear, now twisted into one of these things. I drove the spear through his skull, then flung him skyward, his body bursting apart like fireworks. I felt myself grow stronger with every kill, new strength, new speed. Applause echoed from the platform. "Wonderful. Truly wonderful, Leo. You really are something," the hooded figure said, clapping. I didn't answer. I planted my left foot, spun, and hurled my spear straight at him like a bolt of lightning. The small goblin threw both hands forward the instant I moved, and a pale blue shield snapped into place. The spear struck it hard enough to dent the barrier inward before the shield flashed and hurled it back. I'll admit, I've never seen anyone grow this fast. "But you still can't kill me," the hooded figure said, shaking his head. "You two know each other?" Bulk asked, confused. The figure was talking to me like we had history. "Never seen him before in my life," I said. His voice was completely unfamiliar. "Your growth really is remarkable. I'd hoped to study you a while longer, but to keep the plan on track, I have no choice but to erase you now. All of you." He raised a hand, and something impossibly dark gathered in his palm. "Get over here now," Sophia shouted, face pale, calling everyone together. She started chanting rapidly, and a blue barrier wrapped around all of us. "See what real magic looks like. Death Circle." The hooded figure hurled the black energy down at us. A glowing inverted pentagram formed beneath our feet, dark power tearing into the barrier. "It won't hold," Sophia gasped, straining. "Bruce, use what the Duke gave you now," Bulk shouted. Donovan yanked out the scroll and tore the magic thread without hesitation. "They're trying to escape," the small goblin shrieked, hands rising to cast. "Too late," the hooded figure said, stopping him. "The circle will disrupt any teleport. Even if they survive, they'll get a lesson they won't forget." A flash of white light swept through, and everyone inside the barrier vanished without a trace. Blazing sun, endless sand, and me, all alone out here. "This heat is going to kill me," I muttered, wrapping cloth from my armor around my head against the glare. I splashed myself with a jet of clean water and drank a few big gulps, feeling better right away, then kept moving. I had zero real desert survival experience. The closest thing was some survival videos I'd watched back on Earth. I finally spotted a small patch of scrub brush from a high dune and ran for it. A rattlesnake several feet long hissed a warning at me. One flash of my sword, and its head went flying. When I'd been guiding the group, I'd kept my storage pack on my back so nobody would spot it. During the fight at the ruins, I dropped it outside to move freely, which meant right now, I had zero food. That idiot and his garbage teleport scroll, dumping me in the middle of nowhere, I grumbled, chopping the snake into pieces. I gathered brush, dug a pit, and got a fire going fast. While the snake meat roasted over the flames, I climbed a nearby date palm and stripped it of every ripe date I could reach, stuffing them into storage before sliding back down. Something hissed nearby. My sword flashed and skewered a scorpion bigger than a grown man's palm. Bugs out here are no joke, I muttered, tossing it straight into the fire. I'd heard scorpion tasted like crab, so why waste it? I flipped the snake meat and ate a few dates first, sweet with a bit of a bitter edge, not bad. The snake meat was bland without salt, nothing special. The roasted scorpion turned out great though. I ate it shell and all. Poison wasn't a concern for me anymore, not unless something could kill me instantly. My last skill roll had given me a detox spell, not an attack spell, but I'd kept it anyway. This world was crawling with poisonous monsters, and antidotes were expensive, sometimes impossible to find in small towns. With this skill, anything that didn't outright kill me became fair game to eat. That's exactly why I could eat snake and scorpion without a second thought. Once I was full, I tossed some stones into the fire to heat and built a rough shelter out of branches and leaves. The sun finally backed off for the day, and a thin crescent moon rose over the dunes. Temperature dropped fast, brutal heat by day, freezing cold by night. I pulled the heated stones out and laid them under my leaf bed, added more wood to the fire, and settled in. Staring up at the moon, I felt a pang of frustration. I'd finally landed a big-paying job, and before I even got paid, I got dumped in this godforsaken place. I wondered if Mary and Alika were doing okay, whether they'd still be waiting for me, and Balk and the others. Had they gotten scattered somewhere out here too? Staring at the stars, my thoughts drifted until I fell asleep. A dozen pairs of hungry green eyes locked onto me by the firelight. I yawned, spotting them easily in the bright desert night. A wolf pack, wary of the fire but too hungry to give up on an easy meal. I'd slept well, so I stretched, washed my face with conjured water, and rinsed my mouth, moving slow and lazy on purpose. The wolves practically drooled watching me. "Thanks for the delivery," I said, a spear appearing in my hand. Getting out of this desert meant I needed food and water, and here was dinner walking right up to me. The moment I stepped past the firelight, the wolves swarmed in. I grinned and drove my spear through the first one leaping at me. A clean kill. I yanked it free, blood spraying, and thrust again. Within moments, 5 wolves lay dead, and the rest fled howling into the dark. I spent the rest of that day skinning them, cutting the meat into strips, and roasting everything I could over the fire, organs included. The days in the desert dragged on. Weeks passed, and the horizon still showed nothing but endless sand. Getting out of this place was the only thing on my mind. The wolf meat ran out eventually, but the desert came alive at night, so food was never really a problem. I caught a spider the size of a millstone once, hiding in the sand waiting to ambush prey. My skin caught it first, and I skewered it before it knew what hit it. Tasted like seafood. Not bad at all. Another time I got lucky and found a herd of wild camels. I crept up, thinking about catching one to ride. Then a massive sandworm burst up out of the ground and swallowed one whole, scattering the rest in a panic. After that, I started scanning first whenever something felt off. I never ran into another sandworm, but desert lizards, snakes, and spiders that like to bury themselves during the day started having a very bad time. More than once I'd doze off and wake up mid-strike, spearing something that had crawled too close. I got bitten plenty of times, but my detox spell shrugged everything off. I even got bold enough to intentionally cast it on myself before grabbing something that looked especially venomous, figuring anything that didn't kill me just made a better meal. Today was no different. I reached into the sand and pulled out a huge scorpion, pincers snapping angrily at the terrifying upright ape that had grabbed it. I drew my sword, lit the blade with flame, and it went still fast. I bit straight into its tail and chewed, the roasted shell crisp and satisfying. Then the wind shifted, carrying a different smell through the dry air, one I knew all too well. Blood. The sun blazed down as blood sprayed across the sand. 2 groups were locked in a brutal fight out there. The attackers were small in number, maybe a dozen riders, all wrapped in gray robes and headscarves, nothing showing but their eyes. They tore through the other side on horseback with curved blades, cutting people down one after another, blood soaking fast into the hot sand. The defenders numbered 70 or 80, but most of them were unarmed people in rags, chained at the ankles. Only a handful of guards fought back, protecting a well-dressed man in the middle. The guards were losing fast, and it was obvious this whole caravan was about to fall. "Excuse me. Can somebody tell me how to get out of this desert?" My voice cut through the fighting, loud enough that both sides froze and turned to stare. I looked exactly like what I was, a ragged desert wanderer who'd wandered into the wrong fight. The defenders looked crushed with disappointment. The attackers just looked annoyed. Lost wanderers weren't unusual out here. One of the gray-robed riders finished off a guard and turned his horse toward me instead, planning to cut me down quick and get back to business. A flash of blue light beat him to it. Before he even registered what happened, an ice arrow had punched clean through his chest, half his body freezing solid before the arrow shattered. I sidestepped the riderless horse dragging his corpse and strolled onto the battlefield like I owned the place. "You started this. Don't blame me for finishing it." Truth was, I'd sized up both sides the moment I arrived. The bigger group was clearly a caravan. The masked riders were obviously bandits. I hadn't jumped in to help the caravan right away, though. Something about all those chained, half-naked people told me this wasn't some innocent trade convoy. Looked more like a slave caravan to me. Normally, I'd just let two bad sides tear each other apart, maybe even profit off the wreckage myself. But the bandits weren't just killing the guards, they were killing the slaves too. That crossed a line for me. "Kill him," one of the bandits screamed, seeing his friend die, and charged straight at me. A spear appeared in my hand. I spun at once and put the first charging rider on the ground with a single thrust, then sidestepped another's curved blade and hit him from behind with an ice arrow that punched clean through. Without even looking, I flicked my foot forward and threw the spear. It skewered two more bandits who'd just crossed paths in the distance, both at once. A whistle rang out. The rest of the bandits realized they'd picked a fight with the wrong guy and wheeled their horses around, riding off fast. "Thank you. Thank you so much for driving off those bandits." A heavy-set man approached with his 3 surviving guards, gushing gratitude. "Don't mention it," I said, hand resting on my sword hilt. "Because you're about to die too." I didn't finish the sentence. My blade flashed and took 2 guards' throats clean open, then punched through the mouth of the last one, who never got past his look of pure shock. You, the fat man stammered, completely blindsided. 1 second I was his rescuer, the next I was cutting everyone down. Couldn't be helped. I hate slavers more than almost anything. I sheathed my sword and crouched over the headless body, searching it. Dead men don't need their pockets anymore. I found a small coin pouch stuffed with 20 gold coins and over 100 silver ones. The silver had a camel stamped on it instead of a griffin, but the weight matched exactly. I tested one in my storage system. Worked the same as griffin silver. Nice bonus. I pocketed everything without hesitation. I questioned the freed slaves and finally figured out where I actually was. A huge desert on the far eastern edge of the continent, home to a desert kingdom that used to be a vassal of the old Griffin Empire. That explained the matching currency. This kingdom made its money as the trade route connecting the central and eastern continents. Problem was, this place was thousands of kilometers from where we'd been teleported from. Something had definitely gone wrong with that scroll. More questioning revealed the man I'd killed was a slaver from a desert city called Kaku, and most of these slaves had been bought from desert tribes, though some had clearly just been snatched from smaller caravans or lone travelers the slavers happened across. Yeah, killing them outright was definitely the right call, I muttered. I tossed the guards' keys to the freed slaves and told them to make their own way from here. Then I went to claim one of the pack camels as a mount for myself. That's when I felt it, a faint tremor through the sand. Instinct kicked in before thought did. "Scatter!" I shouted, triggering my scan at the same time. The line map lit up in front of me, a long red line cutting straight toward me. I threw myself sideways without thinking. A massive tooth-lined mouth erupted from the ground and swallowed the camel I'd been about to claim whole. Before I even hit the ground, another red line appeared on the map. A second mouth burst up nearby and swallowed another camel. The rest of the pack animals tore free of their ropes and bolted in terror. Another mouth shot up and swallowed a freed slave who'd just started running. I scanned again, nearly 7 or 8 red lines within just 100 meters. I must have stumbled straight into a sandworm nest. I knew these things hunted by sensing vibrations through the sand, which is why I hadn't moved an inch since landing. But the slaves didn't know that. They scattered in blind panic, feet pounding the sand, and every footstep was practically ringing a dinner bell. One after another, People who'd just tasted freedom got swallowed whole. Don't run. Stop moving, I shouted. It did nothing. Terror had already taken over, and they were beyond listening. A few who'd seen what I could do sprinted straight toward me instead, and behind one of them, a red line was closing in fast. Cold power gathered fast in my hand and shot into the ground. I stepped forward and hurled my spear with everything I had. The giant mouth barely broke the surface before my ice arrow hit it dead on, freezing it in place just long enough for the spear to punch straight through. Yellow fluid sprayed across the sand. The ground shook violently as the other worms, drawn by the blood and thrashing, tore into their wounded kin in a feeding frenzy. I felt myself grow stronger again, leveling up. Once the worms finished ripping each other apart and slid back beneath the dunes, I cursed under my breath. My ride was gone, eaten right along with the rest of the pack camels. I sat down, caught my breath, and gambled on another skill roll. A few misses later, I finally landed something useful, a fireball spell. Rubbing my sore neck, I stood back up. Sir, are you heading to Kaku City? A cleaner-looking man jogged over from the group of freed slaves. You know the way? Yes. Please let me guide you. Lead on then, I said with a wave. He beamed and fell in step behind me. So did most of the others. They'd armed themselves with weapons off the dead bandits and guards, quietly forming up behind me. One wanderer had become a whole group. With the supply camels gone, everyone had to start foraging like I did. We stripped the desert clean wherever we passed. Sir, the coast is just ahead. From there it's a day's walk west to Kaku City, the man, who introduced himself as Hilda, told me. I told him to keep everyone moving until we reached the water. By now, the freed slaves treated me like some kind of legend. I'd chased off bandits single-handedly, killed a slaver, freed them all, then wiped out a giant sandworm and scared off the rest. I could conjure clean water from nothing and pull hidden creatures out of the sand on command. To them, I looked less like a man and more like a miracle. I didn't bother correcting them. Honestly, it wasn't the worst feeling. We reached the coast. Green finally broke up the endless sand, and a small palm grove grew near the shore. Some of the group ran straight into the water to cool off. I could make clean water, sure, but I wasn't about to bathe a whole crowd. A few climbed the palms for coconuts while others gathered firewood, and I lit it with a wave of my hand. Coconuts got brought to me first, out of respect. Others waded the shallows and came back with shellfish, crabs, oysters, even an octopus, and threw it all on the fire. Someone screamed down by the water. A man with a purple-tinged face got carried over and dropped in front of me. I hit him with detox magic and went back to my coconut without a second thought. He was fine within minutes and came over to kneel and thank me. Skip the thanks. Go catch more food instead, I told him. Yes, sir. Right away. Coconut juice and fresh seafood. Honestly, felt like living like a king. Once everyone had eaten, we settled in for the night. Sea breeze without desert heat made for a comfortable night. Hilda, acting as my unofficial right hand now, took it upon himself to organize the night watch. I stretched out on a woven mat and closed my eyes. Hilda said we'd reach Kaku City the next day. Once there, I planned to buy a horse with the stolen coins and finally head back toward the central continent. I fell asleep thinking it over. We were up again before dawn and pushed west. By evening, the outline of a massive city finally rose on the horizon. The group cheered. Then Hilda stepped forward. Hold on. We don't have any legal papers. Getting into the city won't be easy like this. The cheering died fast. Sir, Hilda said, turning to me, we need you to have an identity. What kind of identity? Adio, the dead man, was a slaver registered in this city. You could enter using his name. How exactly? I can't exactly change my face. Just say you're his nephew. Adio was killed by bandits and had no children. So as his blood relative, you're his rightful heir. That's actually a valid claim here? Won't people question it? There's some risk, sure. But since you already have his coin pouch, if we bribe them, how much? Normally a few silver would do. This time, probably more. 2 gold camels should keep them from asking too many questions. Manageable, I said, and produced 2 gold coins from storage like a magic trick. Hilda took them. I'll handle the talking. Then he turned to the rest of the group. Everyone, heads down. Remember, you're his servants and slaves now. Everyone fell into line behind me obediently. We're ready, sir. I walked ahead with my head held high, the rest trailing behind with lowered heads, just like they had when they were still actual slaves. Halt! State your business, a city guard demanded, blocking our path. We're Adio's caravan, Hilda said quickly. This is the new head of the household. Hilda? Where's your master? Dead. Killed by bandits. This is Master Adio's nephew. Under kingdom law, since the master had no children, he's the rightful heir. While talking, Hilda slipped close to the guard and quietly passed him coin. The guard looked him over, then studied me and the crowd behind me. Go ahead. He pocketed the coin and waved us through. Thank you. This way, master, please, Hilda said smoothly. I put on my best noble act and followed him in. The city was crowded, animals everywhere, the streets thick with the smell of livestock. This way, Master Leo. We're heading to Adio's estate. Isn't that a bit much? I asked. By kingdom law, you've inherited everything of his, including the property. There may be complications later, but gold smooths over most problems. What a bizarre legal system, I muttered. Won't his own household expose us? We got lucky, master. Only women remain in his household. As long as you don't throw them out, no one will speak up. Hilda, are you seriously a slave? I asked, watching how smoothly he handled everything. I used to be a civil official here, before a mistake got me demoted to slave status. That explains a lot. I turned to face the group behind me. You're all free now. Go find your own lives. Some thanked me and left. Others stayed. Master, please let us stay with you. I looked at Hilda. Can you find a place for them? We walked into a big estate with Hilda leading the way. A little girl in ragged clothes lit up the second she spotted him. Four veiled women stepped out behind her, eyes darting around, clearly searching for someone. Don't bother looking, Hilda told them. Adio's dead. He turned to me. This is the new head of the household, Master Leo. One of the women gasped. Who is he? A distant nephew of Adio's. Since Adio had no children, by kingdom law, Master Leo is the rightful heir now, but we've never. Hilda cut her off. Are you questioning him? Do you want to be thrown out? Her voice dropped instantly. Another woman spoke up instead. He's not Adio's nephew. Guards, seize him. Two big guards by the door exchanged a look and charged forward. Master, this is your moment, Hilda said, stepping back with his head bowed. I let a small smile show. Silver light flashed, and a head hit the floor before the body even understood what happened, blood spraying up in a fountain. I sheathed my sword and looked around the room. Anyone else object? Not a word. I didn't waste breath on threats, just pulled the blade and let the results speak. The freed slaves who already knew what I was capable of stayed dead silent. Everyone else froze in fear too. Well then, since nobody objects, let's give the master a proper welcome, Hilda said, smirking, clapping his hands. Welcome back, master, the others muttered, bowing quickly, falling in line without hesitation. Where's the bath? I need to wash up. I'm filthy, I said, remembering something I actually cared about. You heard him. Get the bath ready now, Hilda barked, riding high on borrowed authority. Incense filled the room with a soft perfume. Sinking into the small bathing pool, I finally let my whole body relax. Two veiled women walked in, the same two who'd greeted us at the gate. They pulled back their veils. One was blonde with wild, striking eyes, the other dark-haired with a calmer, elegant look. What's this about? You've inherited everything here, master. That includes us. Strangest inheritance law I'd ever heard of, I thought. They came closer. One started working the tension out of my shoulders. The other held a piece of fresh fruit to my lips. I ate the sweet, juicy fruit and let myself enjoy it without guilt. Not long after, two more exotic-looking women arrived, bringing wine in crystal glasses and skewers of spiced roasted meat. Wine, women, luxury. Someone who'd been broke in two different lives had no defenses against that. I lost myself in the flattery and drank until I passed out. Master, trouble, big trouble. I rubbed my throbbing, hungover head and looked at Hilda. What now, master? The Kaku City tournament is about to start. That's the emergency. It wasn't supposed to be. But Adio signed up to compete before he left to buy slaves. Now that he's dead, someone has to answer for it. And that means you, his nephew. Can't we just withdraw? Once you're registered, there's no backing out. If you can't field enough slaves to fight, you have to compete yourself. This is such a headache. We already lost people in the desert attack, and you let more go free just now. We don't have enough bodies left to send instead. Why does this city even run a tournament like this? Tradition of the Desert Kingdom, held every 4 years, and it's Kaku's turn this time. Officially, it settles disputes between the cities. Really, it's just how the powerful sort out who gets what. So regular people fight and die, so the rich can settle their arguments? Exactly. That's just how it's always been here. Not something either of us can change. Hilda sounded resigned. And now that we're back, the city lord's people will be watching us closely. He won't let anyone slip away quietly. He looked at me, almost pleading. Master, with your skill, you could easily disappear from here. I'm asking you to at least take my daughter with you when you go. What about you? Everyone else, you can't save all of us. The rest of us will just have to take our chances. There's another option. I'll enter the tournament myself. Tell the city lord I'll fight in place of all of you, master. Oh, and since Adio was willing to sign up on his own, the prize must be decent, right? Yes, master. First place wins 1,000 gold coins. Perfect. I'm in. Hilda, figure out a way to convince the city lord to let me compete instead of the rest of you. You're really willing to do this, master. Why wouldn't I be? Good money, and it saves everyone's lives. Sounds like a win-win to me. I'll start working on it right away. Might take some bribes, though. Not a problem. Handle it however you need to. Thank you for trusting me, master, Hilda said, beaming. In the ring, I stood holding a spear the arena gave me, facing down a massive gray bear. Up in the stands, the city lord, round as a ball, dripping in silk, surrounded by servant girls, shouted down at me. Hilda keeps saying you're skilled. Prove it. Release the bear. The chains dropped. The bear had been starved for days, and it charged without hesitation. I glanced up at the fat man on his throne, then threw the spear without even watching it land, already turning to walk away. The bear made it 2 steps before the spear tore straight through it. It howled once and dropped. Applause broke out from the stands. Not bad, the city lord said, turning to his captain of the guard. Senka, what do you think of him? Solid. Better than the other candidates. Send him in, then. Oh, can you handle him if needed? No problem at all. 1 strike would be plenty for someone like him, the guard said flatly. That's why you're my best man in Kaku, the lord said, nodding, then turned to me. From now on, you fight for Adio. No one else from your household needs to compete. Then he addressed Hilda, kneeling nearby. You've done well this time, Hilda. I'll grant you your freedom. Thank you, my lord. And my wife? Hilda asked carefully. Oh, right. Sorry, she died a while back. Eaten by a bear, I think. You're still young. Buy another one. Yes, my lord, Hilda said, bowing low, voice flat with practiced submission. Good. Dismissed. Hilda backed away slowly, head down. As he turned, I caught a flash of pure hatred in his eyes before it vanished. A guard walked up and handed me a metal collar. Put this on. Why? It tracks your location. Keeps contestants from running off mid-tournament. I looked at Hilda. He nodded, confirming it. I put it on. One more thing, the guard added. Leave Kaku City during the tournament, and it explodes automatically. What? How can the Lord do that? I said, feigning shock. The guard smirked. Don't try to run, and you'll be fine, then walked off. The moment he was gone, my worried expression dropped instantly. I turned to Hilda. Exactly like you said it would go. I pulled out a small card from storage and tapped it against the collar. A soft click, and it popped open on its own. That fat pig does this to every contestant, never changes his methods. Lucky for us, I already knew who in this city could crack these things, so I got the release device ahead of time. Nice work, Hilda, I said, clapping his shoulder. I just know exactly how that bastard operates. Sounds like you've got a grudge against him. He's the one who reduced my entire family to slavery, Hilda said quietly. Master, the explosive function is gone now, but the tracker still works. You should still wear it most of the time. His eyes and ears are everywhere. Fair point, I said, and after testing that I could pop it open whenever I wanted, clipped the collar back on. With my spot in the tournament secured, I spent a few relaxed days back at Adio's estate before the opening matches began. The prelims are starting. After the regular slave matches, you're up. Don't disappoint the Lord, a guard told me backstage. Or our city's best fighter will take your head off personally and mount it as a trophy, he added with a smirk. Best fighter? I asked. Lord Senka never leaves the city lord's side. Plenty of people have tried to assassinate the Lord over the years. Every single one of them ended up sliced into pieces by his blade. That clicked. The guy who'd been standing behind the fat lord, radiating quiet menace. That was him. Cheers erupted from the arena outside. A guard stuck his head in. Warm-up match is over. You're up. I followed him out to the arena. The last fight's mess hadn't even been cleared. Blood, limbs, and guts everywhere. A group of slaves were shoveling the remains into a pit nearby, where something inside kept growling and snapping at the scraps. I decided I really didn't want to know what lived down there. Remember, the guard warned before leaving, you have to win. Surrender and you're dead either way. Once he left, a weapon rack got wheeled in. I grabbed a spear. My opponent stood across the ring, a massive man in nothing but a loincloth, muscles bulging everywhere, an ugly metal mask covering his face. He'd picked 2 heavy cleavers and started spinning them in a flashy display, whipping the crowd into a frenzy. A small, brightly dressed announcer strutted to the center of the ring with something like a megaphone. Ladies and gentlemen, the real show is about to begin. I looked him over. Goblin, he looked eerily close to one. His ears caught it instantly. You're the goblin. Your whole family's goblins. The crowd roared with laughter. You bastard. I am a goblin. I mean, a goblin-blooded. No, wait. I'm a gnome. A real one. Not some brainless green idiot. The little guy sputtered, jabbing a finger at his own tan skin, furious. More laughter from the stands. Fine, fine. Whatever gets a laugh. Here are the rules. Once the fight starts, it ends only when one side surrenders or dies. Understood. The masked man clashed his 2 blades together loudly. I gave a small nod. Then let the match begin. The gnome bolted for the edge of the ring the moment he finished shouting, already egging the big man on. Show this rude bastard some manners. The masked fighter charged, both blades raised, riding the crowd's energy. By the time the gnome reached the sidelines and spun around to keep narrating, his big favorite was already flat on the ground. I was standing on his chest, calmly pulling my spear back out of his throat. What? It's over already? The gnome shrieked, completely thrown off. He'd clearly been planning a whole dramatic commentary. The stands erupted into a roar that shook the whole arena. I raised my spear, and the crowd's cheering swelled even louder. I was stretched out on a big bed in the restroom, 2 servant girls working out the tension in my back. The last fight had been over in one clean thrust, and it hadn't taken long for word to spread. The heavy iron door opened. A woman with an exotic, striking look stepped in, and the 2 servants slipped out fast. She pulled off her veil. I sat up warily. Who are you? The Lord sent me to serve you, she said, and let her thin robe drop before I could say anything else. Her body was stunning, until I noticed the lash marks all over it. What happened to you? Just the Lord's preference, she said quietly, eyes down. Are you his woman? One of many of his slaves? I frowned. Was this fat lord some kind of pervert who got off on this? Whatever it was, I didn't want any part of it. You can go. I don't need company, I told her flatly. Her face went pale with fear. Please, if you send me back like this, he'll feed me to the beasts. I've got a fight coming up. I don't want to waste my strength. Here's what we'll do. Those 2 earlier didn't finish my massage properly. You can help with that instead. The next day, I fought again and finished it the same way, 1 thrust. After the match, the Lord sent food and another woman. I still had no idea what game the fat man was playing. Same as before, I had her massage me for a bit and sent her off. For the next 2 days, every match ended the same way. The Lord would send over one of his used-up women, and I'd wave her off after a quick shoulder rub. By the 5th day, something changed. Before my match, I was actually brought up to the platform for the first time. This is my champion. Every fighter you brought will fall to him, the fat lord announced proudly to a crowd of finely dressed guests. A rival noble nearby smirked. Your champion? If he were really yours, why the slave collar? Isn't that right, Lord Barah? What? Is that all your city of Anuna is good for, running your mouth? The fat lord shot back without missing a beat. We brought a Real fighter this time. You'll see soon enough. We'll see, the fat lord said, unbothered. Oh, before the match, let's start with a little appetizer. He waved to a guard behind him. Bring them out. Moments later, a gate at the arena floor opened, and a group of crying women were shoved out into the ring. Ooh, what's this act now? The gnome announcer's voice rang out across the arena. My champion, look down there. Those women refuse to obey me, so they're no use to me anymore, the Lord said, gesturing at the arena. I turned to look, and my jaw tightened. I recognized some of them. Their last purpose is to serve as today's appetizer. Ooh, A band of brave warrior women, perhaps, the gnome shouted, then paused as the other gate opened. And facing them, a pack of desert wolves? Wait a second, his tone shifted fast. These women aren't fighters. This isn't a match. I demand this stops. Soldiers rushed in and dragged the gnome off the field before he could keep protesting. Easy, champion. This one isn't yours to fight, the fat lord said, noticing my hand twitch toward my weapon. Beside him, his top fighter watched me with cold, dangerous eyes. Screams rose from below. Regular women stood no chance against a starving wolf pack. They went down fast, and the arena filled with a scene too bloody to look away from. My lord, weren't they yours? I asked, my voice going cold. Mine? Every woman in this city is mine if I want her to be. All I ask of a slave is obedience, the fat lord said, standing and throwing his arms wide. Down in the arena, the crowd roared like animals watching the slaughter unfold. I understood exactly what this display was for. Submit, or end up like them. I said nothing, but in my head, I'd already marked him for death. The wolves finished them off fast, and the cheering only grew louder with every scream. Watching the nobles on the platform and the crowd roaring for blood, it struck me. They weren't any different from the beasts down in the pit. Once the bloody opener wrapped up, the animals were dragged off, and the regular matches began. Slaves from different cities, then the stronger fighters. That's when a familiar figure caught my eye. A massive axe came down in one jump, splitting an opponent clean in half. Bulk? I stared, stunned. He was here? And I noticed something else, no collar on his neck. Was he the real fighter the rival noble had been bragging about? By the 7th day, I finally got my answer. Long time no see, Bulk muttered, holding his axe up to the crowd for show, walking past me in the ring. Bulk, what are you doing here? Where are the others? I said, matching his showman's walk while we talked low. No idea where they ended up. Bruce's teleport scroll glitched and dropped me near Anuna City, on the eastern edge of the desert. What's with the collar? Fat Lord's tracking device. Doesn't want me running off mid-tournament. I gave the platform a mocking little bow toward the Lord. Sounds like your employer's a real piece of work. Guessing you can't just forfeit either. If I forfeit, his top killer puts me down on the spot, so I guess I'm the one forfeiting. The Anuna nobles paid me a fortune to be here. Backing out now would cost me big. I don't buy that you haven't got a plan. You must have clocked me the second you saw me. We both gave the platform another mock bow before squaring off. You're sharp. Before this match, I had a friend put every coin I had on you to win. That's cold. If the nobles found out, you'd be finished. Which is exactly why we need to make this look real. Bulk hefted his axe, ready to charge. Let's give them a real show. Don't cry when I win, I said, raising my left hand, blue-white light already gathering. It was the first time I'd used magic in this arena. The crowd erupted. Blue-white light streaked toward Bulk the moment he charged, cold wrapping around him instantly. That's not enough, he roared, and red light burst off his skin, steam rolling off him as the frost shattered away. He leapt into the air and swung down at me hard. I planted my spear and vaulted back out of range. He recovered fast and came in with a sweeping horizontal cut. I hopped back again, firing a quick jab of frost his way. He turned his axe and blocked it with the flat side. We traded blows back and forth across the ring, putting on a good show. Let's wrap this up, I said. Fine by me. He left an opening on purpose. I caught it and knocked his axe clean out of his hands. I surrender. I forfeit, Bulk shouted, throwing his hands up. I raised my spear in victory. Victory for Kaku City's champion. The announcer bellowed from the platform, and the crowd roared like an earthquake. 2 days ago, that sound would have thrilled me. Now it just gave me a headache. Want help cracking that collar? Bulk muttered as he left. Already handled. You worry about dodging the noble's anger instead. I lifted my spear, faking a victory pose for the crowd. I made it to the final round. Win tomorrow, and the championship was mine outright. The Lord wants to see you up top, a guard told me. Got it. Up on the platform, the fat lord looked pleased with himself. The rival noble beside him looked furious. He hadn't expected a slave from Kaku to turn out to be a spellcaster. The minotaur he'd paid a fortune for had lasted 2 exchanges before losing. Everything after this was basically pointless. The championship was already decided. Guards searched me before letting me up. My Kaku champion arrives, the fat lord said, standing and spreading his arms in a fake show of warmth. Serving you is an honor, my lord, I said, matching his fakeness. Serve me well, and you'll end up dead with nothing left to bury you. None of Bara's slaves ever get a happy ending. Tomorrow's your last performance. The rival noble cut in before the lord could finish. Hey, watch your mouth, the fat lord snapped, glaring. If this guy weren't the eldest son of the city lord of Greenshade, next in line to rule, he'd have had Sanka gut him on the spot. I would never mistreat someone loyal to. A massive explosion rocked the city before he could finish. That damn gnome again. I'll have him thrown out of the city for good this time, the fat lord grumbled, annoyed at the interruption. A guard rushed up and whispered something in his ear. What? The lord's face turned red with rage, glaring straight at me. You filthy slave. You had Hilda set fire to my property. What? I had no idea what he was talking about. Kill him. Kill him now. The same man who'd been calling me his champion a second ago was now screaming for my death. A guard behind me reached for his blade at the order. My fist caught him across the jaw before he could draw it, teeth flying. No time for even a scream before he flew off the platform. Sanka, standing beside the lord, pulled out a small black device and pressed it instantly. Nothing happened. Why isn't it working? Sanka snapped, stunned. You mean this? I said, tapping the collar. It clicked open and dropped to the floor. I raised my left hand and a fireball formed in my palm. As Sanka shouted, I hurled it straight at the fat lord. His curved blade flashed and knocked the fireball aside. It detonated anyway, igniting a few unlucky guards nearby and flooding the platform with blinding light. The guards closing in on me screamed and clutched their eyes. Chaos erupted instantly. Sanka was blinded too, but he kept his composure, blade steady, ready to cut down anyone who got close. A breeze stirred. His blade flashed and split my ice arrow clean in half. Then his throat exploded in pain. The spear following right behind the arrow had already punched through it. Where did that weapon come from? Was Sanka's last thought as my piercing thrust finished him. I ripped the spear sideways, tearing his throat wide open, then swept it across the nearby guards, dropping them one after another, hands clutching their spurting necks. I ran flame along the spear tip with a swipe of my hand, then drove it forward again, straight through Sanka's eye and out the other side. Best of all Kaku's fighters or not, dead was dead, and I made sure of it. I pulled the spear free, his head already catching fire. I felt myself surge with new strength, leveling up again from the kills. You! What are you doing, slave? The lord shrieked at me. I just looked at him like he was an idiot. The rival noble and his guards had already bolted, not even pretending they'd help. You want me dead? Fine, I'll return the favor, I said. What? Do you even know who I am? The lord stammered, still trying to bluster. I do, he grinned, relieved, assuming that meant I wouldn't dare touch him. A disgusting fat pig who's about to die, I said. He panicked instantly. Don't kill me. Anything you want. It's yours. What I want is a world without you in it. I drove the spear straight into his gut, flames catching his fat instantly. His screams were music to my ears. In seconds, he was a burning ball of flame. I ripped the spear free and flung his burning body like a meteor into the center of the arena, then hurled a few more fireballs into the panicking crowd for good measure. The flash and flames sent the whole arena into chaos, people trampling each other, trying to escape. Over here. This way. A greasy little gnome popped up out of nowhere, waving me over frantically. I spun my spear once, dropping the last few guards closing in, throats opened wide, then slipped my weapon away and vanished into the panicking crowd. Kaku City burned around me. Explosions still going off, the whole place falling apart. The gnome dragged me along the second I got clear of the arena, talking fast the whole way. Turns out Hilda had come to him days ago, paid a fortune for explosives, then hired him to find me in the chaos and get me out of the city. Where's Hilda now? I asked. Probably long gone. The stuff I sold him had timers built in. I still couldn't wrap my head around it. I'd been one match away from winning, and everything blew up in my face. No idea what he was thinking, but he left you a letter with me. Come on. We cut through the slums and came out at what looked like a junkyard. In the distance I spotted Balk, axe in hand, standing guard beside something that looked like a hot air balloon strapped to a boat. He waved us over hard. Come on, hurry. Is that a hot air balloon? I asked, running. It's an airship, made by Jarek. Not a balloon. An airship? You sure this thing actually flies? Looking at all the patches covering the balloon, I had serious doubts. Of course it flies. Jarek's work is always top quality. Get on, we're leaving. This is yours? Aren't you the arena announcer? Side job. This is my real profession. Get on, now. Sketchy as it looked, I climbed aboard anyway. Bulk grabbed the gnome by the collar and tossed him in, then hopped in himself. The gnome scrambled to the furnace in the middle, yanked a lever, and black smoke belched out, coating his face while the flame roared up. Quick, throw those rocks overboard, he shouted at us. Bulk and I heaved the ballast stones out, and the airship started lifting off slowly. Halt. Stop right there. A cavalry unit came charging toward the ship, shouting. You too, stop them, the soot-covered gnome yelled. Bulk glanced at his axe, then at me. You handle it. The riders were already drawing arrows. I raised my hand, flame gathering, and hurled a fireball. It caught the lead rider, turning him into a burning wreck instantly, the blast and flash scattering the rest of the formation. By the time they recovered, we were already dozens of meters up. They just stood there cursing at us from the ground. Eat rocks, you bastards, Bulk said, dropping the last stone and dusting off his hands. Bulk, how are you here? I asked. He's the friend who put my bet down for me last time, Bulk said, dropping into an open seat. Anyone who pays is a friend of Jarek's, the gnome said, pulling out a hammer from somewhere and banging on the ship's machinery. A propeller at the back sputtered to life, and the ship began drifting forward. So, Goblin Man, can I get Hilda's letter now? You're the goblin. I, Jarek, have the finest brain of any gnome alive. Jarek adjusted the ship's heading, set his tools down, dug around the bow, and handed over a soot-stained letter. I tore it open, glanced at it, then handed it back. Read it to me. I can't read this script. Lucky for you. Hilda already paid extra for reading services. Jarek cleared his throat and started reading. It told the story of an honest official who'd angered the city lord over something small, lost everything, and ended up enslaved along with his daughter. Master Leo, I'm sorry. Ever since I learned Bara killed my wife, hatred consumed me. While you were busy with the tournament, I quietly used Adio's fortune to buy incendiaries to use against him. I knew once he found out, he'd come after you, and I knew someone as ruthless as you would strike back first. I have no strength of my own for revenge and a daughter to protect, so this was my only path. I'm asking your forgiveness. I'm sorry, Master Leo. Jarek finished reading with dramatic flair and handed the letter back. That idiot, sneaking around like that. If he wanted someone dead, he could have just asked me, I muttered, tossing the letter into the furnace. All that time wasted for nothing. Well, not entirely nothing. I had leveled up at least. Wait, you actually killed the city lord? Bulk asked, frowning. Obviously. He tried to kill me first. Was I supposed to just let that happen? I shot back without hesitation. That fat pig deserved it. He fired me from my announcer gig, was going to run me out of the city, and never even paid me. Jarek chimed in, joining the pylon. That lord only had his position because his brother is King Aladdin of the Desert Kingdom. The king may not have liked him much, but you killed him in front of everyone. The king can't just ignore that. So what if the king finds out? I said, unbothered. I had nothing to lose. Aladdin's not someone to underestimate. He might send palace assassins after you. Watch your back. Bulk just shrugged at how unbothered I looked. He sends someone, I kill them. He sends two, I kill both. If he keeps bothering me, eventually I'll go after the king himself. Yeah, I guess worrying about you was pointless. So how do you two even know each other? I asked Bulk. Remember that collar you had? Ever wonder who invented those? Bulk rubbed his own neck and glanced at the gnome. I used to wear one myself. Someone happened to know how to crack it. No, wait, that wasn't me. My cousin invented the slave collar. My cousin. I swear on my own brother's life. Nothing to do with me. Jarek blurted out fast, clearly rattled remembering what I'd done in the arena. So Hilda bought the release device from you too? I'm guessing. Jarek likes helping friends. That explains why the card worked so fast. Sounds like you and your cousin are pretty close. He even shared the backdoor with you. Yep, exactly. What can I say? Family bonds run deep. Ha ha. I pulled out the small card. Does this work on every collar? No way. Different makers, different unlock methods. Jarek shook his big head. So that means my cousin made that one. Not me. I gave up on him and sat down. Where are we headed now? Back to Zakiya City. Already paid for the fare. The airship climbed higher, and Bach's voice started shaking a little. Turned out he wasn't a fan of heights. This junk heap can really fly that far? I asked, still not sold on the creaking contraption. Junk heap? This is my masterpiece, the future of travel. Building it cost me every coin I had, or I wouldn't have taken a job this dangerous. But now I've got it. I can run trade between continents. Give it time, and I'll be a world-class merchant, Jarek bragged. Good luck with that, big shot merchant. I stretched out on the deck and rolled the dice on another skill. After spending a good chunk of silver, I finally landed something I actually wanted, an upgraded version of my freezing beam, stronger and colder than before. I raised my hand and let the cold pour out, noticeably sharper than before. Ugh, why is it getting colder in here? Bulk muttered, pulling his collar up. Then the furnace let out a loud bang, startling all three of us. Hey, is this thing actually safe? We're in the sky. We go down, we're all dead, Bulk shouted at Jarek, alarmed. Relax. Gnome engineering, guaranteed to impress. The airship crashed into the ground in a massive fireball, hundreds of meters below the three of us drifting slowly down through the sky. Wow, real inspiring technology you've got there, I said, watching the explosion below. My masterpiece, my life's work. It's gone, it's all gone. That damn bird. I'll catch it and roast it myself, Jarek cursed, floating beside me, furious. Never riding anything Gunno-made again, Bulk muttered, pale as a sheet. The airship had carried us west for days, shedding the occasional part, but holding together well enough. Then that morning, a giant eagle-like bird had come screaming out of the dawn light and attacked us. I'd driven it off with magic, but the fight had loosened something critical in the rigging. Jarek tried to fix it with his hammer. Predictably, hammering already broken junk just made it worse. When things started looking bad, I told him to grab the parachutes. He looked at me blank. What's a parachute? I remembered I'd once rolled a falling slow spell and immediately started re-rolling for it. After burning through over 100 silver, I finally swapped out my fire weapon spell for it. Just as the ship fell apart completely under Jarek's repairs, the slow fall spell saved us from becoming pancakes. Bet you scavenged those parts from a junkyard. One peck from a bird, and the whole thing fell apart, I said, bored, taking the opportunity to needle the gnome. Huh, what would a human know? More patches means more people have used it, and more use means better quality. That's gnome logic, Jarek argued, craning his neck like that actually made sense. How long's this spell last, Leo? It's not going to just cut out on us, right? Bulk asked, shaking. Relax, it'll get us to the ground fine, I told him. A screech sounded behind us. Jarek, go catch it. We'll help you roast it, I teased, spinning to look. Don't eat me. Don't eat me. I'm small. They're bigger. Jarek had already curled into a ball, muttering nonsense. Come on, you damn bird. Come taste my axe, Bulk roared, swinging his weapon, channeling his fear of heights into pure rage at the incoming threat. The giant bird folded its wings and dove straight at us. I raised my hand and blasted it with my freezing beam. It banked hard to dodge, but the beam caught up anyway, coating its whole body in ice. Screeching, it slammed toward me anyway, momentum too much to stop. I dropped the beam and grabbed my spear, driving it straight into the bird's body the instant before impact. Then the sky darkened above us. Massive claws dropped out of the clouds and snatched the bird, a creature 3 times the size of a grown man, clean out of the air, then beat its huge wings and flew off into the distance. Hey, a dragon? Jarek stammered. A wyvern? Gnome, did your airship take a wrong turn somewhere? Wait, where's Leo? Bulk suddenly noticed I was gone. Cold wind roared past. I was getting a free ride, soaring through the sky, wedged into the giant bird's soft wing with only my head sticking out. The freezing wind stung my exposed skin, but the feathers around me stayed warm enough that the cold didn't really bother me. The ground blurred by below, first desert sand, then endless mountains. The wyvern carried me deep into the range. Its massive wings beat hard, kicking up clouds of dust as it dropped the dead bird to the ground. The grip around me loosened, and I scrambled free from under the wing. That's when I saw it properly, something dragon-like, its forelimbs fused into wings. Startled by my sudden appearance, it froze mid-meal, then bared its teeth and hissed a warning at me. I pulled my spear free from the dead bird and slowly backed away. Once I'd cleared some distance from its meal, it grabbed the carcass and flew off toward another peak, apparently uninterested in a fight. Actually intelligent, I muttered, watching it go. I climbed to the ridge and looked out. Nothing but endless mountains and rocky wasteland in every direction. Where the hell am I now? I groaned. Barely out of the slave pits, and already reduced to caveman living. I got my bearings, cast the slow fall spell on myself, and jumped off the ridge toward the southwest. Days later, at a mining site called Balatu, deep in the Stone Path Mountains, snow was falling as a ragged, half-starved figure showed up at the workers' shelter outside the pit. "You're really an adventurer?" The bald dwarf foreman eyed me like a beggar, which, given how I was tearing through the food they'd handed me, was fair. Weeks alone in the mountains had turned me feral, living on whatever protein I could catch. "Of course," I said between bites, pulling out my long-neglected adventurer's tag. "Fine, I believe you're an adventurer. But the job here isn't something a second-tier adventurer can handle. Tell you what, let me finish the job first, then pay me. If I can't do it, you lose nothing. You sure about that?" I didn't answer. I just pressed a finger against his mug of ale. When he picked it back up, it had turned to solid ice. "A mage," the foreman gasped, delighted. "The real deal," I said, chipping some ice into my own drink and taking a swig. "There's a den of kobolds down in the mine. Clear them all out. Deal." "I'm in." I dumped a blood-soaked sack on the ground, and a pile of charred, ugly heads rolled out. "That's the job done. 22 adult goblins and 14 pups, all here." I tossed the sack aside. A few nearby villagers backed away fast. "Most people just want ears, but you insisted on whole heads. Wasn't easy hauling all that around. Spring's coming, and goblins get bolder this time of year. Hang these at the village entrance, and they'll stay away for a while," the chief explained. "Scare tactics. Not a bad idea," I said, nodding, and took the 20 silver he handed over without even glancing at it before dropping it in storage. Jobs like this weren't really about the money, more like doing a favor for people who needed it. It had been a long stretch since I climbed out of those mountains. I'd been picking up small village jobs along the way while traveling. Without a guild taking a cut, villages paid less overall, but the work was inconsistent. Still, something was better than nothing. "Adventurer, sir, are you heading to Claret City?" "Yeah." "Why?" "We're taking produce there to sell. You're welcome to ride along." "Appreciate it," I said. I could tell the chief wanted free protection along the way, but I didn't mind. Beat walking. The cart got loaded up with pickled vegetables and dried meat, and I climbed into the back as it rattled off down the muddy spring roads. "We're here, adventurer." I woke up as the cart rolled into the market. Yawning, I took in the city around me. Claret sat on the eastern edge of the old empire, right up against the Great Desert, one of the busiest trade hubs on the continent. Just glancing around, I spotted all kinds of other races, beast folk, half-breeds, and even a sharp-eared elf, something I'd only ever heard about. She stood nearly 2 meters tall, blue-tinted skin, what people called a wood elf, gorgeous and terrifyingly unstable at the same time. While I watched, some poor guy bumped into her by accident and got decked so hard he hit the ground, and she just walked off without a second glance. This world had a few elf races, all matriarchal, women running everything. Elves held grudges hard and were nasty with assassination and strange magic. Cross one and you tended to die mysteriously not long after. Most people knew better than to try. My foster father used to say you could risk angering a noble before you'd risk angering an elf, especially wood elves or dark elves. I stopped a stranger to ask directions and headed for the biggest tavern in town. "House special and a beer, please," I told the innkeeper, taking a corner seat. "Beer's coming right up. Food'll take a bit." A big mug of beer arrived. I touched the rim lightly, and it froze into a chilled brew instantly. Spring or not, cold beer was still better. I let out a satisfied breath. The house special arrived next, a steak seared dark on the outside, dusted with rosemary, smelling incredible. A bowl of pea soup and 2 thick slabs of white bread rounded it out. Better than what some noble families ate in the small towns, minus the silverware. Hungry as I was, I didn't care about formalities. I rubbed my hands together, rinsed them with a splash of conjured water, and dug into the steak with my bare hands. The rosemary hit just right, the meat tender and full of flavor. I chased it with a long drink of the cold beer. Perfect. Then someone dropped into the seat across from me without asking. "See, customer, what can I get you?" the innkeeper stammered, biting her tongue in her panic. The wood elf glanced at my plate, cool and detached. Same as him, right away, coming right up. The innkeeper stuttered and hurried off. Clearly the reputation elves carried wasn't exaggerated. Her beer arrived moments later. She stared at it, frowning. Why does his have ice and mine doesn't? Is that an insult? And no, sir. I mean, ma'am. I'm so sorry. The poor innkeeper panicked, tripping over her words. Not her fault. I cut in. I did the ice myself. Want some? I waved my hand over her mug, and a thin layer of frost formed on the beer. The elf said, giving me a nod. Thank you, the innkeeper said, relieved. I smiled. While you're at it, another round for me too. Coming right up, she said, brightening. Guessed she'd figured out this shabby-looking customer was more than he appeared. Why were you staring at me earlier, Mage? The elf asked flatly, taking a sip. I'm a regular guy. A pretty woman walks by. I look. Nothing unusual about that. She studied me hard for a moment, then relaxed. Guess we're not enemies. Hope we stay that way. I don't go looking for enemies. Doesn't mean I'm scared of anyone who decides to make one of me either. I took another drink and went back to my food. She wasn't throwing herself at me, so I wasn't going to chase. After eating, I wandered the city and found an armor shop. Being a trade hub, they even carried full plate, at a price. The cheapest mass-produced set ran 30 gold, and the dwarven forged showpiece went for 200. I only had 17 gold total. I settled for a half-plate chest piece and a helmet, 8 gold total. New padded armor underneath, half-plate over it, and an open-face steel helm on top. Good enough to call myself a half-heavy fighter now. I spent another 60 silver expanding my storage to 16 slots, then picked up a proper arming sword and a few sharp spears from the weapon shop for 4 gold. Last thing on the list was a quiet, clean inn for the night. Come morning, I planned to hit the Adventurers Guild and ask around about bulk. Silver rank adventurers weren't hard to track down. Then pick up a job, ideally guarding a caravan headed towards Ikea, so I could earn money and get a ride at the same time. Good plan. Didn't survive contact with reality. While looking for a place to stay, I stumbled onto a street I hadn't expected. Filthy, run down, unmistakably a slave market. The old empire used to ban slave trading outright, but plenty of places had quietly brought it back. The profits were just too good to pass up. And there, locked in one of the cages lining the street, was a face I recognized. A gnome. Enslaved.